As is customary, I will now do my chairman's introduction, which will give you the rules of engagement for today, if those of you are unused to these virtual meetings. And forgive me for reading from a script, but it is very long. I would like to welcome everyone to this virtual meeting of the executive. Before we move to the formal agenda, there are a few procedural housekeeping issues to remind you of. This meeting is being held under the virtual meetings regulations using Microsoft Teams. Decisions made by the executive will have the same standing and validity as if it made a physical meeting held at the town hall. We are streaming today's meeting live on the internet, and a recorded version will be available to view within 48 hours on the North Somerset Council website. Members of the public may see a number of different people on screen during the course of the meeting, but only members of the executive will make the decision on each agenda item. I would refer councillors to the meeting etiquette and guide to Teams as previously emailed to all. Please remember to use your headphones. This will improve the quality of the sound for everyone. Members of the executive, please keep your video on during the meeting to ensure that your audio is muted when you are not speaking. When you wish to speak, would you please indicate this by using the chat function rather than hand signals function? It's easy to monitor requests to speak from a single source. I invite each of you to speak by way of a queue system. If you're leaving or returning to the meeting, would you please ensure that I'm aware of this by using the chat function? This is particularly important in respect of any disclosable pecuniary interests where you're not permitted to participate in the agenda item by law. You should immediately leave the meeting before the start of any debate on an item where you have a disposable pecuniary interest. Democratic Services Officer will confirm when you've left the meeting and rejoin following determination of the agenda item. Non-executive members, would you please ensure that your audio is muted and your video is turned off when you're not speaking. Please also use the chat function to indicate when you wish to speak. I remind members that the chat function only be used for purposes of requesting to speak or associated matters and not for general chat. If we have any members joining by telephone, I will check whether you wish to speak before concluding the debate on agenda items. Please could you also mute your phones when not speaking, as this will reduce background noise interference. You can mute and unmute mobiles or landlines by pressing *6. Voting. When proposing a motion, would you please indicate via the chat function you wish to speak and wait until I invite you to do so. Please then state what you are moving, for example, the recommendation report. If you're seconding a motion, please again clearly indicate you wish to speak and wait for me to call you. Generally, voting at this meeting will be done in reverse order and en bloc. That is, first I will firstly request votes against the motion, then abstentions, then all other executive members in the meeting have taken to vote en bloc for the voting for the motion. As chairman, if I determine there should be a voting by roll call, the solicitor will call out each councillor in turn by name. Please state clearly if your vote is for the motion, against the motion, or abstain. Please remember to turn on your microphone when voting and mute when you have spoken. This will ensure the vote is correctly recorded for more controversial matters and will enable members of the public to properly observe the vote. Can I please check that all members can hear and see today's proceedings? And please ensure any mobiles are switched to silent. Ruth, you're now muted. So the agenda begins with item number 1. Before we start, I will ask each member of the executive in turn to introduce themselves. So I am Donald Davis, the councillor for Peel Ward, and I am leader of the council and chair of this meeting. Mike Bell.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Bell. I'm the deputy leader of council and the executive member for adult social care and health.
Mark Hannaford.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the executive member for business, economy and employment and responsibilities currently for parking.
Ashley Cartman.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ash Cartman. I'm the ward councillor for Long Ashton and I'm the executive member for finance and performance.
Caritas Charles.
Hello, I'm Caritas Charles and I'm the executive member for leisure, community arts, culture and community engagement.
Catherine Gibbons.
Hello, I'm Catherine Gibbons. I'm a ward councillor for Milton Ward in Weston-super-Mare, and I'm the executive member for Children's Services and Lifelong Learning.
Bridget Petty.
Hello, I'm Bridget Petty, councillor for Green Party councillor for Backwell, and I'm executive member for Climate Emergency and the Environment.
James Tonkin. You're muted, James.
Good afternoon, I'm James Tonkin. I represent West End of Nailsea and I'm the Executive Member for Planning, Highways and Building Control.
Thank you very much. That shows also that all the members of the executive are in attendance today. The other person that you may hear is Mr. Nick Brain, who is the council's solicitor. Nick, I don't know if you want to briefly introduce yourself in case you come on the screen so people wonder who you are.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm Solicitor of the Council and here in advisory capacity.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the first item on my agenda, item number 1, is addresses by members of the public. We have had one from Mr. Ian Studley, a resident of Lee Woods, concerning the Lee Woods parking scheme. Because of its complicated nature, I asked for it to be circulated to all members well in advance, and that should have been done yesterday. And I've personally checked with both Councillor Cartman, who is a ward councillor, and with Councillor Mark Canniford, who is responsible executive member for this, that the Mr. Studley's letter will be considered under item 11 on today's agenda. Okay. Item number 2 is apologies for absence. As we have all accounted for ourselves in the roll call, there are none. Item 3, declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest. Are there any?
Nothing in chat, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you. Item number 4 is the minutes of the meeting of the 9th of September. A copy of those appears with the meeting papers. Can I have a proposer and a seconder that they are an accurate record?
Yeah, proposed.
Proposed, they're accepted. Seconded, Chairman.
Okay, so if it's proposed by Mike Bell and seconded by James Tonkin, are there any votes against acceptance? Are there any abstentions?
Nothing, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you, Hazel. So on that basis, we're all in support of the minutes being adopted from the previous meeting. Thank you, colleagues. We now move on to item number 5, which is non-executive council's addresses. I don't believe any have been received. Am I correct, Nick Brain?
That is correct, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you. Matters referred to the executive, not elsewhere on the agenda. I believe there are none.
Again, correct, Chairman.
Okay. Item 7 is the West of England sub-region items not dealt with elsewhere on this agenda. I will just briefly comment that we are still in the negotiation stage for North Somerset Council to potentially join the West of England Combined Authority, and we are discussing the consultation process that would occur to facilitate that. And as soon as I have more concrete details beyond that, to colleagues, I will bring them to you. And please recall from previous discussions, this is ultimately a council decision to be made. So anything that ultimately comes back to us would be a council decision to make. Okay, so just to let you know, we are continuing with that, but I have nothing further to report. Item number 8 is the forward plan, which is to be noted. Are we executive colleagues happy to note that? Okay. Hazel, is anybody any comments or questions on the forward plan?
Nothing in chat, Chairman.
Lovely. So we've noted that, colleagues. We're all happy to note that. Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to make a slight adjustment to the agenda. I'm now going to go to item number 13, which is the Ofsted report and draft improvement plan. And I believe that Sheila Smith, our Director of People and Communities, is going to lead this in conjunction with Catherine Gibbons, who is the executive member responsible. Can I hand it over to you two to take this item, please, colleagues?
Do you want to start, Councillor Gibbons? Do the introduction?
I don't mind. It's entirely up to you who goes first. I'm not going to fight over it.
You can do a duet if you want.
Yes, you start.
Sorry, can I just say, and this is going to sound really awful, but I've just been on a very difficult telephone call, and I appreciate this is a public meeting. Are we on the Ofsted item, or are we on a different item? Sorry.
13, Ofsted report and draft improvement plan.
Okay, sorry. So in that case, I'm in the zone. So what you've got in front of you is both the Ofsted inspection report that came as a result of their inspection earlier this year, and you also have our current draft improvement plan that was sent through to Ofsted, and for which we will receive in due course their sort of feedback stroke agreement. What is clear, and I have outlined it in the accompanying report, what is clear is that despite progress that had been made, particularly in regard to services and outcomes for children in care and care leavers, nevertheless, there were areas of work where we hadn't made sufficient progress such that we could have turned out some areas for development into areas for strength. So the report, whilst it is a mixed bag, nevertheless, there has to be the challenge around why do we continue to be an authority that requires improvement to be good in the context of our children's services. Following the Ofsted inspection and obviously also the COVID work that we had to get involved in, we had a subsequent conversation with colleagues from the Department for Education who have given us quite considerable challenge as a council around what our ambitions are for our children's services and indeed our children and young people, but also are we serious about seeking to improve our services such that we could aspire to be good or outstanding across all the relevant domains. As a consequence of that, what had been an internal quality and performance board chaired by the chief executive and attended by our leader and lead member for children's services has now had to be considerably, I guess, increased in membership, but also have a much higher challenge level, because it now will include the Department for Education representatives, and they have appointed an advisor, an independent advisor, who will come along and act as a critical friend, particularly to the lead member and myself as Director for Children's Services, but generally to us as a council in regard to the improvement priorities we've identified and the progress that we will need to make on those identified priorities. I've outlined in the report that the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee will play quite an important strategic scrutineer function in this. But I have also made clear that the Department for Education will be taking regular reports from their independent advisor, and ultimately they will have a say in terms of how successful they believe we've been on our improvement journey. I think that's probably the best outline I can give at the moment without getting into too much detail, but I'm happy to take any questions, and I'll hand over now to Councillor Gibbons from her perspective.
Thank you. Yes, I'm just going to say from my point of view, when I took up this role, I think one of the main things I wanted was to get children's services to be a key focus in this council. And in a strange way, I see this improvement plan as an opportunity, because it's an enormous piece of work. As a council, we've done a lot of remarkable work in terms of climate change. And I want to see us taking on the responsibility for children, young people and children's services in exactly the same light and with the same priority. So I see this as a springboard for doing that. And also, as Sheila has said, you know, there were positives within the Ofsted report. And one of the things was that they recognised that the new political leadership and the new chief executive had prioritised children. And we've done that with our new corporate plan. And I want to thank my executive colleagues for listening in the last budget and actually putting in some growth in children's services to enable us to enhance our offer to foster carers, which in the long run makes it easier for us to get in-house carers and is a way of investing to save, as one says, and also for recognising the needs in early help, which received crucial investment. We are entering a really difficult period. I'm well aware of that. There's today, in fact, a consortium of 5 major children's charities have released a report and have lobbied the government. And I just wanted to mention that, you know, we, like all local authorities, are operating against a backdrop where there's £2.2 billion less funding for children than there was in 2010-11. And on top of that, we have 136 million additional spend, nationally this is, on children's social care as a result of the pandemic. That's just between March and July. So obviously, I'm aware that this is a very challenging environment nationally. And I just want to say that and I'm sure my executive colleagues will agree that as an administration, we are absolutely committed to lobbying central government, supporting such initiatives as these 5 charities who have asked that the government take on board the needs of our children. And I quote, say that the government must step in and properly fund local authorities so that they can reach out to children, young people and families before their problems escalate. This is the key. This is what our aspiration is, to offer the best outcomes for our children. And I'm aware we're going to be having some challenging conversations in terms of the budget. But I just want to say that our commitment as an administration, and mine personally, is absolutely 100% behind doing the best we possibly can. We've done some things quite quickly. We've been able to address some areas of corporate parenting. We've increased the number of meetings that the corporate parenting panel has from 3 per year to 6. So we'll have a much more engaged and ongoing focus on our children looked after. We are bringing a report on corporate parenting to each council meeting so that members are fully aware of what we're doing. And we're doing some other things to make sure that every council member is fully informed and engaged on what we do for our children. And I'm sure that you'll get sick and tired of me badgering you all on that subject. But we are making progress and we are absolutely committed to following this through. I just hope that any members will get in touch with me or Sheila and ask us questions. Please, if you haven't already, read the improvement plan. It's a great piece of work. It's a challenge. And we're not unaware of the scale of the work that's going to be involved. But we welcome input, and I personally am happy to talk to anybody about it. So, you know, email me or give me a ring and we can discuss it personally. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. You know, having been to the Improvement Board meetings, I would like to put on record my thanks to both our own staff team, but also to the external people that have been kind enough to help advise us. And if you do look on the appendices, at the very end of the appendices, a list of all those, and these come from far and wide, not only from the Department of Education, but also from other councils as well. So I'd like to put on record my thanks, and I'm sure on behalf of all the executive, to them. So we have 3 recommendations in terms of this report. Can I take it, Catherine, that you will be proposing?
Yes,
and
indeed.
Do we have a seconder from the executive? Okay, Councillor Bridget Petty has indicated she will second, so thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Bridget.
I will ask Hazel, who's helping me. Hazel, do any officers wish to add any points to this item?
There's no requests from officers, Chairman, just one from Councillor Bella's exec member.
Okay, and any other requests from fellow members of the council? None?
Nothing in chat, Chairman, no.
Okay, love. So, Councillor Mike Bell.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Catherine and Sheila, for the introduction on this item. And I really wanted to just echo and amplify the very final bit of your remarks, Catherine, around the scale of the challenge, because I think it is important that we recognise that there were weaknesses identified as a result of the Ofsted inspection, and aspects that we as elected members and as a wider community will recognise in terms of some of our children's services. So I think it is important that we do, hold our hands up and take responsibility when things are not always good enough. And I think, any journey to improvement starts with recognising where things aren't good enough and framing a plan to improve things. So I really welcome that. I just wanted to highlight two aspects. One is around special educational needs and disabilities and children and families with children in those categories. I think for many years it's been a very challenging environment with increased demand and pressure from families and growing numbers of children living with SEND. And a lack of funding from central government to support that. So we've seen that, year on year, we've really struggled to deliver the services that people have every right to expect. But I think what we are absolutely focused on now, and Catherine articulated it really powerfully, is putting this front and centre in terms of our priorities, because frankly, if COVID-19 and the pandemic that we're in at the moment and our discussions about the climate emergency, if they don't call to mind the absolute essential need to make sure that children and young people are given the support they need and the best possible start in life, if we don't make that investment and if we don't get those services right, then so much else that we would want to achieve and the ambitions we would have as a council and a community will simply not be delivered. So I just applaud that and totally endorse this report, and just emphasise to everyone that we will be keeping on top of this with regular reports, regular feedback. We don't want to be sitting here in 3 years' time having the same conversations. We need to do better, and we will.
Thank you, Mike. I think Joe Walker, our Chief Exec, wants to make some comments.
I believe so, Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to echo the points that had been made, but also put on record my personal thanks to all our staff on the front line who have not just supported children over the years, but also actually went through that Ofsted experience, which is quite grueling in itself. And we very much own the outcome of the Ofsted findings, and I'm delighted also to say that we're working very closely with our partners through the Improvement Board. And I think that's a point that I wanted to stress, that we cannot deliver this improvement change alone. It requires us working collaboratively with partners in education, in health, police, as an example, or as a number of examples, which I'm confident we can do, and they are represented on our new revitalised Improvement Board, along with our colleagues at the DFE, Department for Education. So this is a very clear priority for us right from the top as officers, as well as I know it is for you as the executive and for all members. So I just wanted to put that on record.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Hazel, anybody else wishing to speak?
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Petty is asked to speak, followed by Councillor Gibbons as executive members.
Okay, Bridget Petty.
Hi, thanks. I wanted to echo much of what Mike Bell and Catherine Gibbons had said already, but just to add an additional strengthening agreement that the situation of the funding given to our children's services departments and all of our local council services over the past years, and now over the past 10 years significantly, have just been diminished, and central government is continuing to squeeze those numbers, and it makes it very difficult, I believe, for those who are working on the front line and those working hard at the council to continue to deliver good services. And I know that they work passionately and they work very hard to do it. And I believe that us as elected members are all committed to delivering better for these children as well. Linked to that, I'm continuing to be appalled that our amount of money for our children in our schools through the Department of Education is significantly lower than that into cities. And I appreciate that the schools and the education does deliver some different services, but they also have a role in our safeguarding and our care packages. So I do wonder if there's some role to be said for writing to our MPs again, and the council really committing to write to them to kind of question why it is that our children are not receiving as much funding in our schools as the urban settings, because it very much concerns me. And in this COVID era, I can see that we've got significant risks on many families, those who have been identified in the past and those who have never been identified, because the strains that households and families are being put under now and in the future is significant. So we have many children to worry about, and I know that this executive and this set administration is committed to trying to protect them now and in the future. And I think the work we're doing with climate change also ties into that, but it's strength in community and looking after everybody around us. So that was what I wanted to contribute.
Thank you, Bridget. Catherine, did you want to say anything more?
Yeah, I was just going to thank my executive colleagues for support for the work that we want to do, and just to say, yes, that, you know, in response to Bridget, you know, if we're fighting to preserve our environment, to make this planet a better place, who are we doing it for? We are doing it for the next generation. We're doing it for the young people and the children. So if we are not giving them, as Mike Bell has said, you know, if we're not doing our absolute best to give them the best start in life and look after those who are more vulnerable, then I think that we are failing as a society. So I think we have to keep up the pressure on central government to recognise what really matters, to recognise their responsibilities. I mean, one of the first things we did back in July last year was to write to the Secretary of State on the issue of SEND, you know, and put the pressure on there. We cannot, as an administration, let up. We have to keep holding the government to account, and in the hope that we will actually get the recognition and the funding that we need, not just for children's services, but generally in local government, because it isn't good enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a proposer and a second to this motion. Hazel, anybody else that wishes to speak?
No, Chairman.
Okay, we'll go for the vote then. Is anybody, I'm going to go for the 3 recommendations en bloc. Is anybody voting against?
Nothing, Chairman.
Any abstentions?
Nothing, Chairman.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you. I'll take that as a vote for all 3 recommendations. So thank you very much, colleagues, and thank you, officers, and thank you, everybody. And we'll now move on to item number 9, which I believe Councillor James Tonkin is going to lead on.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the subject of the report is the M5 Junction 21 northbound merge scheme, which is going to be increasing the existing slip road onto the motorway in the northbound direction, in other words, towards Clevedon, from its existing single traffic into twin lanes. The scheme is forecast to have strong congestion relief characteristics to the morning peak traffic, reducing congestion on the 370 approaching the motorway from Weston-super-Mare. Over the last 5 years, the Council has been working with Highways England to develop the scheme and secure a funding package. The funding is now in place, and Highways England are programmed to deliver the scheme in 2021. This report sets out the detail of the funding package, describes the agreement by which Highways England will deliver the scheme on the Council's behalf, seeks authority to enter the funding agreement, and transfer the funds to Highway England. And the recommendations are: 1, that the Council enter an RIF agreement and draws down the 450,000 revolving infrastructure fund contribution towards the scheme. 2, that the Council enter an S274 agreement whereby Highways England deliver the scheme on the Council's behalf. And 3, that the Council transfer funds to Highways England to enable the scheme to be implemented. I'll take any questions, but I'll also look for a seconder for the recommendations.
So James, you are proposing this. Do we find a seconder?
Yes, thanks.
Ashley Cartman is seconding, so thank you, Ash. Okay, so are there any officer comments, do you know, James, on this?
I don't think so, Chairman.
Okay, so let's see if there's any debate. Hazel, has anybody indicated they wish to speak?
No, Chairman.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing this forward.
Apologies, Chairman. Councillor Caniford has just asked to speak.
Councillor Caniford. Mark Caniford.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Hazel. It was a little late. I was fiddling around with trying to find which mouse to use. A rookie mistake, as Councillor Bell says. James, the only question I'd like to ask, I mean, This is a really important scheme, and I think that those of us who live in and around Weston have understood the importance of this for some time. In terms of the cost of the scheme and the amount of money being spent, can you assure me this isn't just a scheme of line painting and there'll be something more considerable to actually manage that traffic? Because at £3.7 million, I would be concerned Highways England were, it would be unfair to say taking advantage, but I would like to see the value of money in terms of this. And is there going to be any structure? Is there a part of widening that road? So that's where the considerable cost comes in.
Thank you for that, Mark. Yeah, it's a proper road construction scheme. It's not just a white lining aspect. So, yes, yeah, I can assure you of that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I've got a couple of questions, James. I mean, the first one is the incredible frustration it's taken us this long to do it when some of us pointed out it was a problem in the first place when the junction was reorganised about 5 or 6 years ago. So thank you very much for bringing this forward. Second question is, will we be able to press Highways England to use local contractors to do this work?
That's something I'll have to refer back. I would hope so. Could we ask Highways England to, as a preference, as we are effectively paying for this through our own council tax payment, that they would give favour to our local contractors, be they large or small, especially given the issues around the local economy currently. I think it would be very helpful. Of course. If they could support us in that regard. Okay, thank you. I'll speak with the officers concerned. Thank you.
Hey, Hazel, do we have any more questions, comments?
Yes, Chairman, Councillor Petty.
Oh, Councillor Petty. Thank you. Bridget.
Hi, thank you, James. What I'd like to know is whether we know whether, much like Don asked about who would be doing the construction work, could we ask Highways England or whoever is going to be involved in the construction work to provide us some details about the carbon emissions associated with the capital works they'll be doing? I think that as the council makes decisions about spending large amounts of money on capital schemes, we need to start thinking about how we're going to monitor the emissions that come associated with these capital schemes so that we can be properly reporting on the decisions that we make and how they impact. I can see that there's reference in the climate change and environmental impact section about how it improves bus routes, but I think that we need to think about when we have big capital projects, putting in more information about the impact of the construction work going.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll follow that through. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And hopefully from a carbon reduction point of view, this will facilitate the better running of buses to and from Weston-super-Mare up the motorway. So I would hope that will be a positive in terms of reducing car use. And
again, that's in the report.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing is it will reduce the amount of queuing traffic, therefore the carbon reduction there of unnecessary idling of engines. So I think that, as far as I know, is that it for questions, Hazel?
Yes, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you. So let's go for the vote. I'll take the recommendations of which there are, as James read out, 3. I'll take them en bloc. Is anybody against?
Nothing, Chairman.
Are there any abstentions?
Again, Councillor Petty is indicating.
You're abstaining, are you?
I think I'd like to abstain today.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. So 1 abstention. So with the exception of Councillor Petty, can I assume that everybody else is voting in favour? Okay, that is then carried by the majority. Thank you. Now we move on to item number 10. Which I'm quick enough with my buttons, I can even find out what it is. That is the pre-consultation sign-off of the North Somerset Active Travel Strategy, which again is yourself, James Tonkin.
Thank you, Chairman. Summary of the report, just very briefly, I'll use the first 2 items. North Somerset Council has been developing its active travel strategy over the last few months. The aim of the ATS is to create a 10-year plan to enable, promote and increase walking, cycling and other active travel modes such as running, wheeling and scooting. It sets out as an inspiration for active travel in North Somerset, which is encapsulated by the vision statement for this active travel strategy, which is making walking and cycling the natural choice for a cleaner, healthier and a more active North Somerset. The recommendation is that we approve the draft active travel strategy document for public consultation, which will be for 6 weeks between the 2nd of November and the 14th of December. And I look for a second, and I'll take any questions. Thank you.
So James Tonkin, I think, is proposing. I think Councillor Bridget Petty is seconding. Okay, lovely. Thank you. I'd like to thank the officers for producing this report. I've gone through it in detail. We must use our cars less, and we need to encourage fairer use of the road space, which actually the council taxpayers of North Somerset pay for, regardless of whether they're car owners or not. Okay, so think of that. Is there any further comment from officers?
Can't say anything, Chairman.
Okay, is there any comment from non-exec councillors?
I'm not sure if Councillor Crockford-Hawley wishes to make a comment.
Can you enlighten us, Councillor Crockford-Hawley? Do you wish to make a comment?
I only put up a message to say it's a very nice document you've produced. Why did it take nearly 100 pages, though?
89.
89 pages to tell us what, on the whole, we already know and want and seek. I despair. But over to you, you're the executive.
Well, I guess the problem is, John, that we can see it, but not everybody can. If we don't lay it out in such detail, we'll get complained at for making assumptions that people know what they don't know.
Okay, as they say, whatever.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Chairman, can I just make one other comment? I have forgotten to thank both the officers concerned on both of my recommendations, and I'd like to do that now.
Thank you. Hayes, are there any other questions or comments?
Yes, we have requests to speak from executive members, Councillor Petty and Councillor Gibbons.
Okay, well, Bridget Petty.
Yeah, I think this is I appreciate the question mark from John Crockford-Hawley as to whether the document is a little long. That's a fair feedback, but I do think that there are lots of really promising and good things that the council wants to be talking about with regards for active travel. And maybe the time has come for active travel rather than many hours of discussion about car users and those things. So I think we do need to give airtime to supporting our cyclists and our walkers. And we certainly know that there are many co-benefits to people getting out of their cars, making that walking journey to the local shops, using their local shops, and keeping a healthy and well community, as well as bumping into neighbours, increasing that community vibe and resilience. I really applaud the bold commitment to increase, now I've lost the number, but I believe it's 300% increase in walking and cycling through this strategy. You know, we want a strategy for a kind of 10-year or longer period about how we can really make genuine change to the way that people live their lives in North Somerset. And if we continue to behave in the way we are, each and every one of us, with our habitual habit of getting into the car, we will not address climate change, but we will also not address the health risks that are a problem for all of our communities. So I applaud this work, and I'm really delighted that Councillor Tonkin and the team all involved have done a great job. And I look forward to pushing out this consultation as widely as possible to get all breadths of our community to respond to this consultation, because it's a consultation so that people can tell us what they think, and hopefully we'll be hearing from some keen walkers and cyclists.
Lovely. And Councillor Petty, if we refer to item 2.2 of the item here, would you like to comment about what happened last Thursday?
What happened last Thursday? Me?
Well, you organised it, so I thought you remember.
Oh, sorry. It's a long time ago. My children are coming down sick, so life's a bit of a blur. Last Thursday.
It's a big day for us all.
Sorry, everybody. Last Thursday, I was delighted that after many months and much conversation, our council was the first council to have its leadership, both elected members, all members were invited, and senior management were invited to carbon literacy training. So that was a one-day event with significant in-depth training that many of us attended, and we have homework, and hopefully we'll all get ourselves accredited. And North Somerset is the first council, I believe, in the country to have our elected members receive that training. So from then on, hopefully we will all embed the commitments we've made to responding to this climate emergency, so that the decisions we make at this council are fit for purpose and are fit for the future of the generation living now and the generation who will live in North Somerset in the future. So thank you everybody who participated.
Thank you. Catherine Gibbons.
Thank you. Yes, like Councillor Petty, I welcome this. Just wanted to ask a couple of questions on the section bikeability and the commitment to educate children and adults
as well. Could you refer to which page it is, Catherine?
It is page 23
of the report.
Of the yes, of the actual strategy rather than the report to executive. It's bikeability and an aspiration to make sure that we train 50% of pupils to level 1 by the end of year 4, 50% to level 2 by the end of primary, and 20% to level 3 by the end of year 9. I just wanted to ask or make a plea actually that I and possibly our 2 new youth champions could be involved in this and have sort of some idea of what's actually going to happen and be able to disseminate the right information and links and any educational material to our schools, because I think it's great and I'd just like to have some sort of hands-on, if you like, involvement in it if possible.
So yeah. Page 24 and which is page 71 if you've got the PDF. Anybody wishes to look at that, okay?
Okay, yeah, I'll make sure that happens, Catherine.
We have a proposer and a seconder. Is there any further debate, Hazel?
Yes, Councillor Bridger and Councillor Richardson as non-executive members have asked to speak.
Yes, Steve Bridger.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, very, very briefly, just to picking up actually what Councillor Crawford-Hawley was just saying. I know that John would just want us to say, want us to just go and do this. But this is obviously something that's going out for public consultation, so I think it needs to be a standalone document. We need to take the public with us on this. It's a 10-year plan, isn't it? But much of it is already underway, actually, in some form. And I think we'd use this document to support bids, wouldn't we? So I think it's important in that respect as well. I think it's a really, really excellent and well-written document. So. Well done to the officers and executive sponsors on this one. It's really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I got Jeff Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to make a plea, really. It is a long document, and there are lots of references to other documents, and indeed to numbers like 50% of the people in North Somerset do this and whatever. All that, especially if it's going out for consultation, needs to be referenced, so that people can actually understand where these numbers are coming from. You just can't claim percentages without saying where you're getting that information from. Just for clarity and openness, I would say.
I believe that on the copy I've seen, Jeff, that there are footnotes on each page. Are you saying there should be more?
Maybe I'm talking largely about the report that's come to us, Don, rather than the document itself.
Okay, right. So the actual executive report rather than the consultation paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make sure you have a copy of it, Jeff.
Okay, thanks, James.
Hazel, is anybody else? Can I go to the vote?
No, you can proceed to the vote, Chairman.
Okay, well, as James Tonkin has proposed, is read out, there is one recommendation that we send this off for consultation for people of North Somerset and beyond. Is anybody against?
Nothing in chat, Chairman.
Anybody abstaining?
Again, nothing, Chairman.
Thank you. So therefore, unanimously passed by the executive. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, officers, for the hard work on this. And there is still more to come once we get through the consultation, actually deliver this. So I think it's only a start. But thank you very much, everybody. We now go on to item number 10. Forgive me, is the pre-consultation sign-off. Oh no, sorry, item number 11 is the parking review, which I believe is going to be led by Mark Hannaford.
Thank you, Don. Right, yes, I'll just speak to this briefly. I'm aware we've got officers to answer any questions. In terms of the report, bear with me, excuse me, IT. You can see the, so I'd like to propose the recommendations, but I am aware of an amendment. So if we can take note, there is going to be an amendment, but if we can move the debate forward by me proposing the recommendations.
Okay.
And look for a seconder.
Councillor James Tonkin is seconding. Thank you.
As you're aware, first of all, I would like to thank officers. This is particularly Steve and Colin Meadus, Steve Thorne. It is a comprehensive piece of work, and I must say the amount of consultation in terms of with councillors, with myself, Ash Cartman has, I imagine, put hours into this this proposal or these proposals, and thank him for that, because he has undoubtedly spent an awful lot of time talking to the residents of Lee Woods as well in that consultation in part of these recommendations. But in terms of the report overall, I think people are probably interested to know what we're doing in the sense of parking and the consultation. As everybody knows, back before COVID, there was a great deal of controversy and discussion around how parking should be dealt with in North Somerset. But quite clearly, our environment and the situation that we find ourselves in has undoubtedly changed. And due to that, I think that we need to be mindful that changing policy around parking would possibly cause difficulty for businesses and for communities in the towns of North Somerset. And I think because of that, we have decided, as you will see in the recommendations, to put parking policy on a 10-year journey, so we can look at how we can do this in a more structured manner, and indeed with a great deal of consultation with residents and businesses in our other towns. Now, taking that into account, of course, we've got to be mindful of our commitments, carbon reduction commitments, and of course the difficulties that people do have in parking. The consultation was quite clear that even though it was clear that people didn't really want to pay for parking in our other towns, it was also very clear that parking was extremely difficult in those towns. So taking the consultation as a whole, we have to do something. So in the long term, as you will see, that we will set ourselves on a journey to see how we can solve those problems and look at how we can ease the parking difficulties in Clevedon, Nailsea and Portishead. I would like to, again, come on to the commitments that we've made as a council about a fair society in North Somerset and a fair system in North Somerset. And we'd have to look at that. As many of you will know, I have shouted about that for an awful long time. But circumstances have changed, and it is very hard for me to propose and introduce schemes in areas that people are really worried about until we can put the evidence together and the proof together that they will help those areas in particular. But Lee Woods was a different situation. Lee Woods is a scheme that people have been requesting us to look at and us to do for some time. Even our predecessors were grappling with this problem for quite a long time, deciding how to deal with it. There's been a huge amount of consultation on this one, and we have undoubtedly gone backwards and forwards. We have certainly consulted with residents. I've personally met residents in Lee Woods, and Ashley Cartman and myself have met on numerous occasions to try and draw out the details of this. We have taken considerable note of the consultation, and we have changed the scheme on several points. It's probably not the same scheme at all as we started because of that consultation, and therefore residents should be probably, I would like to think them pleased that we have made those changes. However, I am fully aware that a scheme that introduces parking won't make everyone happy anyway, and there'll always be some difficulties with that. And the discussion paper that we were given by one of the residents in Lee Woods, which was posted on to us yesterday, had some really interesting and difficult points to deal with. But they can be dealt with, and they can be dealt with quite easily in the sense that, and I don't say that belittling the comments made, I think the comments made by the gentleman were really good. But I think what we haven't done in the past, what we haven't done is really review the work we've always done. We've sort of put a scheme in place and not looked at it again. Now, the comments made around the paper that we all received, some of them can be easily dealt with because I don't believe that the information given, they have quite grasped what we're trying to do in terms of the fact there will be visitor parking schemes. Anyone can park in the charge bays, and I think what is important is that if we put in a charge of £5 for all-day parking, and we find the commuters don't leave Lee Woods, we will increase that level. So a lot of those people will leave Lee Woods. And that will be reviewed within 6 months with the responsible exec member and Councillor Ash Cartman, who represents that area, and officers. So I can assure residents that this is not a done deal in the sense, if it doesn't work, it's not going to be forced. If it doesn't work, it will be changed. And I can assure residents that that is the case. Everybody has agreed and signed up to that. In terms of the amount of spaces, what I think is really important with some of the comments that have come forward, this scheme has to work for everybody. Lee Woods is a beautiful place, and I understand residents of Lee Woods want some protection to their parking in their area. But the whole of North Somerset belongs to everyone in North Somerset when it comes to the roads. And there are people I'm aware in Councillor Tonkin's ward who travel to Lee Woods and go to work. So we can't say no, but we can say you have to take into consideration this is someone's home. And I think that's very reasonable. And I don't believe doing nothing, as it's been suggested in the letter sent to council, is an option. We've done nothing for far too long, and it's just become a bigger and bigger problem. And if we continue to do nothing, then quite clearly the problem isn't going to go away. If we put the same ingredients in the cake, what are we going to get out? The same cake. So let's change it. Let's give it a go. Let's make sure that we have done a considerable amount of work on this. Let's make sure that once we've put this in place, we can look at the review it in 6 months' time to make any changes that might be necessary. And let's get on and try and clear some of those roads in Lee Woods, because it has been particularly difficult over the years. And of course, as we've said all along, Lee Woods is the pilot scheme to introduce the parking permits into other charged areas. So the Centre of Weston-super-Mare have waited far, far, far too long for a resident parking area, for residents' parking zones. They have had to put up with parking charges for 9 years now, nearly 10, with no ability to park anywhere near their homes. This sets the target for this, and this will now allow us to start working on a scheme that works, because the last thing we want to do, which has happened in some of our neighbouring authorities, they introduce a scheme and then they have to withdraw it because it didn't work. So let's get it right on the first occasion. And I don't know whether Colin would like to add anything to my comments. Colin Meaders?
No, I've got nothing to add at this point, Mark.
Okay, so Don, I think if any questions, we can progress to questioning and some debate.
Chairman, you're muted.
Councillor Cartman, as a ward member, did you wish to say anything?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do want to say a few things, and I have got an amendment to propose as well, but just a few short passing comments. Thank you to Mark for all his hard work on this. This has been a really tricky issue, and although there's lots of tricky issues as a councillor that you encompass, and I've been a councillor just over a year, this is possibly the trickiest I've ever encountered. It's about balancing everyone's needs, and that's the thing that makes it really hard, but at the same time getting local support. And that really is the tricky aspect to do. And I know the team have done a really good job. So thank you to Colin, Stephen and Rob Thompson as well, who've worked really hard on this. And it has taken hours and hours and hours and hours. The principle that we came up with that seemed to resonate well with lots of people actually is that there are 3 user groups, and this might be useful for future schemes, and that's visitors, commuters and residents, and it's about balancing those 3. And we had the idea that we should be looking at sharing the space equally amongst those 3, and that seems to be universally accepted. And even, you know, looking at Mr. Stoodley's comments, who I have spoken to over the last year and a half at various points, you know, he accepts that point. And I think the reason partly for me moving an amendment, which I'll come to, is to move towards that fairer allocation of space between those 3 user groups. At the moment, there's a predominance of space available or would be available to commuters, and that could be problematic. So I think upon reflection, just coming to the amendment then, I think it's about increasing the amount of short-term parking. So those of you not familiar with Lee Woods, there is an aspect or part of the village around the church that we foresee as being a pinch point with respect to visitors to obviously the church for services and weddings, etc. There's quite a demand from residents there, and also that there's an element of there is space for commuters, but it doesn't need to be there. The reason why that we'd not put this forward before is there were reservations around how enforceable it would be. Now, I have reflected on this, and I think actually the preference is, this amendment, is that we put short-term parking in this area and then we review it after 6 months to see if it's not working. I believe that we can make it enforceable. I understand and have listened to the concerns of officers. So on that basis, I'd like to propose the following, and I forward this to Mr. Nick Braid, so he has it already. With respect to the introduction of the Lee Woods on-street parking scheme, additional restricted short-term parking be introduced in the vicinity of the church to better meet the needs of visitors and residents. These spaces would not be available for all-day parking. Officers will work with local councillors and the executive member to ensure adequate short-term provision is made in this regard. The final decision will rest with the executive member. And I look for someone to second that for me. Thank you, Councillor Davis. And I'd like to perhaps propose that for debate as well and take any questions. Mark, I don't know if you've got any comments either as well, and whether you want to open it up to Colin to comment.
I mean, I will take advice from my colleagues on the executive, but I am happy to take that on as one of the recommendations, Ash, so we wouldn't have to. But I just want to voice the concerns of officers, because I am aware, and you know, and I understand, because I've had the privilege of dealing with parking issues in Weston-super-Mare for many years, and the confusion that we could face and the challenge we can face from parking enforcement will be that if someone parks 10 feet away in the wrong space and gets a ticket, they will challenge the council that what we've introduced is unreasonable. And so we have worked hard, as you're aware, we have worked hard on trying to very much segregate the short term from the long term. And I think that I do find myself in support of officers, even though I am happy to follow executive members and what their feelings about this, is that quite clearly the tool to control commuter parking will be the price. That is what will encourage people to find another mode of transport or encourage people to change their behaviour. And if we, for example, find that Lee Woods continues to fill up every day with people parking and the residents still don't get the benefit of their own village, we will then alter that charging regime to push those commuters away. But I have no doubt, looking at the behaviour of parking when charging is introduced, that parking won't be an issue in Lee Woods in the future once we've introduced a scheme, and people will be able to use their residence parking schemes to get somewhere near their home, because they will be able to park pretty much anywhere in Lee Woods, where those people who want to park all day will be restricted, and restricted further if we have to increase the price. So even though so I would like to take a lead from my colleagues. If all colleagues feel this should be part of the recommendations, we will take it. But if there is considerable dissent or we feel like we cannot agree, then I think we need to go to a vote on it. However, I'll leave it to Don to lead the debate.
Well, I would say the reason I've seconded this is that because I am a member of the Parochial Church Council at Lee Woods Church, St Mary the Virgin, and I think it's very important as a community space. There is some ability for people visiting that church for services to be able to park. It's also a community space for the area. There's a cinema run there, plus a lot of activities, and of course the church itself is in a united benefice with the Holy Trinity Church in Abbotsleigh, and services do interchange on a weekly basis between the two churches. I think it's very important we have some accessibility. In terms of the location of the church in relation to commuters, it is the furthest away from the suspension bridge. Therefore, the distance to be walked is quite long to get into Bristol. And my own experience of the parking at that end of Lee Woods is less than approaching the bridge and the other surrounding roads. So I'm supportive of this, and mainly to try and make sure we can still have that facility. There are an awful lot of very elderly people who visit the church for the social events that happen during the afternoon, and I think it's very unfair that they're being asked to have to spend an awful lot of money for what was relatively short periods of time spent at the church. So I'm very supportive of Ash Cartman's amendment, and I think it's entirely workable. So I will open up to debate. Hazel, do we have anybody?
Yes, Chairman. You have, in terms of non-executive members, Councillor Payne, followed by Councillor Richardson, and then Councillor Cato. And then you have executive members, Councillor Charles, Gibbons, Bell and Petty.
Okay, so Robert Payne.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to talk about the proposed residence parking schemes. I'm very keen that the council gets on with introducing a residence parking scheme within Weston-super-Mare. I just wanted to say a few words about the proposed charge, which I understand is proposed to be £60 for the first permit in a household. Now, I know that a lot of people who live near to the centre of Weston would be willing to pay that sort of price to help with easing the parking nightmare that they have. But nonetheless, I do feel that it is a little bit on the pricey side, particularly when it's compared to other schemes in other areas. For example, Devon County Council run a scheme which includes Exeter City Centre, and Torbay Unitary Authority run a scheme, both of which they charge £30 for a permit. So I would hope that the executive can consider that price and maybe reduce it to that sort of level for the first permit in a household. Thank you.
Well, are we referring to the scheme in Lee Woods, or because we're not discussing a Weston-super-Mare scheme in detail here? We're discussing the actual. My understanding the pricing charging relates to the Lee Woods scheme. Is that correct, Mark Hannaford?
Yeah, the current pricing discussions in this paper is about Lee Woods, but I think it would be fair to say to Councillor Payne that looking at the argument that we have used all the way through the process, that we are hoping to have a very similar scheme. And these figures have been pretty much worked up about cost. It's around the cost of putting these schemes together. And if, for example, we have staff actually checking these out, making sure and issuing permits, the first one has been pretty much set on cost. Second one, in all honesty, has been set about trying to discourage too much car use. And there could be some discussion around that. But in terms of fairness, like we've always said, Councillor Payne, the same price doesn't necessarily mean fair. So, you know, at the beginning of this review process, we were looking at other areas for charging, and those areas did not necessarily, we never spoke about the fact that they would necessarily pay the same as those charges in Weston-super-Mare, for example, because that might not be fair. The fair is having a principle, and the principle of residence permit will be introduced through the Lee Woods scheme, and then we can work on what would be the appropriate and fair scheme in Weston-super-Mare.
Jeff Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to suggest that we try and align this with public transport going to that area. I have a suggestion from Clevedon where the bus could go down Beggarbush Lane and then turn right, and that would take commuters from Clevedon to within striking distance of Clifton. Otherwise, there is no route from Clevedon to Clifton. So just a suggestion to go with the parking proposals.
Well, I mean, the issue, Jeff, of course, is that all the bus services, pretty much all the bus services in North Somerset are commercially run, as opposed to us having any particular say in them. We don't have any funding to do that.
I don't believe it would need any funding, Don, because basically it's just going two sides of the triangle rather than the other, and there are no major stops on the other route. So I just think it's worth having a conversation.
Thank you.
And Don, I think it is worth the conversation, because obviously I've already been contacted by residents in other towns, and if they can find a easier route to get to the Clifton area, they wouldn't then take their car. But if we can just get the bus to make a slight alteration, and the fact is, because we are introducing charges into Lee Woods, it should become a commercial opportunity for them, because it's either paying for a bus to get to that area or it's paying for parking. So there might be an opportunity there to have that discussion.
Which we will have them with first. Thank you.
Yeah.
John Cato.
My thoughts are much the same, really. I was thinking this needs to be looked at holistically going forward, because it's part of the journey to carbon neutrality. The more that we can look at integrating better, rapid, cheap, cost-effective public transport systems, which I know we have difficulties with at the moment, and integrating that with the active travel projects that we've got underway, the more we can look to charging appropriately to reduce the carbon emissions as well, and providing everything everybody wants to do as a holistic manner. So for me, it's beyond just parking, it's the whole thing. Just want that observed.
Councillor Charles.
Yes, and I want to thank Mark and all the staff that worked on this, because I actually think it's a clear demonstration that this administration has listened, and has particularly listened to the towns in the north and their concerns. And I know Mark has been doing some extensive work there, and I'd like to thank him for that and the consideration that he's given. I would also like to ask a question of Mark as well, though, which is kind of similar to Councillor Cato's, is whether we also, running parallel with this 10-year review strategy, as an executive and administration, look to campaign around issues such as the changes to planning regulations that actually force more cars into our neighbourhoods, and actually have a proper planning structure that allows for transport hubs, that allows for decent parking within our neighbourhoods, and that campaign should run parallel with any parking review.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Councillor Charles. I think with there's so many things that we can look at in terms of in the whole around parking, because parking is a result of car use, and difficult parking is the result of too much car use. And we have to look, as we are in Portishead with the line into Bristol, that will hopefully take a huge amount of cars off our roads, and the need not necessarily to own cars. And I think that's really important for our residents, but we do have to make it easy to get round. We do have to, I mean, there's lots of things we would love to have. I mean, I would be one immediately to want the old trams back that Councillor Crawford-Hawley have showed me pictures of, running up and down the main roads in Weston-super-Mare, and not use cars. But the fact is that isn't going to happen anytime soon. But there's no reason why it can't be an ambition for the long term. And you're quite right. In that 10-year look at it, we need to look at the picture as a whole, and understand that parking is a result of car use, not what we actually desire to have as the solution.
In 10 years' time, we won't be using any cars.
Well, I think so. I think Councillor Bell wanted to speak earlier on as well.
Catherine Gibbons.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. Councillor Payne did sort of allude to what I wanted to ask. When it comes to having residents' parking zones in Weston-super-Mare, and I have many residents within my ward that would be very keen on this for lots of reasons. I just wanted to make sure that it will be affordable, because I think maybe residents are thinking, oh, this is great, but they haven't factored in that there will be a charge, and there may be significant numbers of elderly people who would find a charge of £60 something that they'd have to think twice about. And so we have to look at how we make sure this is fair for residents. But my other question is about the timeline and how we are going to communicate to our residents the actual process by which an area gets to maybe be considered for a residents' parking zone. When's that going to be published or publicised? And my third point, which is something that is particular to my ward and possibly yours, is how can we work better with some of our institutions, our educational institutions particularly, to make sure that they educate and stop people using their cars so much? Because, you know, in Milton, we have the Locking Road campus, the skills campus from Weston College, and that involves many people coming to study there or work there, and they fill up the local roads. I don't believe that most of them come that far, and I'm sure there are buses. So can we work a little bit more closely with our schools and colleges as a council to make sure that they are doing their bit, let's say, to prevent this problem? As it stands, it's very difficult for residents to get double yellow lines in certain roads. I know, because I've tried, and we're waiting, you know, for the residents' parking zone idea to take off. But there are simple solutions. So how can we do that? That's my question to you. How can we get these institutions on board to stop people driving and parking?
Well, what I'll do is I'll answer those questions. I don't know if Mike's got any further questions or just a comment, but if I come in after that, and I'll answer those, Catherine.
Mike Bell, do you want a question, comment? Great idea, everything is. We spent even longer on this than we did on children's services, but then again.
Yes, and I'm not sure.
I was going to comment on that.
And I'm not sure it's a debate that's particularly advancing the issues, is it? But anyway, I mean, I think it is a good report, and I welcome it, and I certainly welcome the work that officers and Mark has put into this, and I think I agree entirely with what Caritas said, that, you know, I think it's a good example of how we have listened as an administration to the feedback that we've had, you know, from the town councils, from residents, businesses and others. So I think that's really welcome. However, I will just throw in a slightly sour note into that and say that it is incredibly frustrating that we're still sitting here talking about a plan for residents' parking zone proposals. As a Weston-super-Mare councillor, as someone who represents the town centre, you've heard from Mark and from Robert about the challenges that residents face, and it's incredibly frustrating that we are no further forward than we were well, 5, dare I say, nearly 10 years ago in terms of a scheme for the town centre, and it simply isn't good enough. We really must progress this much more quickly so that we can demonstrate that there are some trial schemes in operation early next year in Weston-super-Mare town centre, because residents in the town centre have been given no respite. If they live in the pay and display zone, the only on-street pay and display zone in the whole of North Somerset, and that's going to stay that way, isn't it, as a result of these recommendations, they've had to put up with it for a decade. Not being able to park outside their own home, not being able to access a reasonable permit, not being able to have visitors and tradespeople in the way that every other part of North Somerset is able to, and we haven't even been able to offer them a reasonable permit scheme. And then, of course, the displacement effect caused by the pay and display zone, which means that many other areas outside the display zone have also had their parking impacted. You know, we all know there are no easy answers, and that's why nothing's been done, because it's difficult and tricky. But we have to make progress on this, and we cannot be here in a year's time still talking about the theory of it. So I totally endorse what the report is recommending and putting renewed emphasis on the residents' parking zone proposals and really making that happen. But there has to be a really clear timetabled and ambitious programme to make that happen by the summer of next year. And I hope that the Lee Wood scheme will help us to get some of the teething troubles out the way for an approach. But we need to give some hope to people living particularly in the pay and display zone in Weston-super-Mare that help is coming, and that we are listening not just to the towns in the northern part of our district, but to the people living in Weston-super-Mare as well.
Thank you, Mike, and I would endorse the comments you've made about residents' parking schemes. And actually, I think you'll find them to be very popular in significant parts of the whole of the district, not just in Weston Town Centre. There's parking problems everywhere. And I think I can see Caritas Charles in front of me. I'm sure there are problems around where he lives. There are problems in the centre of Cleveland. There are problems in Nailsea. And I do think that residents' parking schemes are the way forward, and I do think we should be acting. And actually, we might not get it 100% right, but at the moment it ain't right either, is it? So, you know, it's not as if we're taking perfection and going to destroy it. We've got a massive lack of perfection. And I entirely accept your challenge, Mike. I think we do need to take it forward, and certainly this time next year, I would hope we've done it. Bridget Petty.
Thank you. A number of people have made some interesting points, and for me, actually, I'm sorry, I don't believe that the parking permits is the silver bullet, but let's see what happens. For me, I do think that right now it's clear that it is an unfair situation in that the centre of Weston has a significant challenge that they pay and they don't have the right to park near their homes. We've promoted an active transport travel strategy. We've promoted cycling. We've promoted walking. But unfortunately in this world, it is about carrots and sticks sometimes. And if we don't start discouraging people getting in their cars, then I do worry that that behavioural change will not happen. If I think about travelling to Bristol, I think, well, I'm going to pay to park there. That's okay. That's normal. Or I'm going to pay to get on the bus. And I make that economic decision. Right now, I don't think people are facing the real, genuine economic decision when they get in their car and they drive to the nearest town and they park for free. Parking for free when actually that land costs money, that maintenance costs money. If they paid, some of that money could go into better public transport. Now, if we had better public transport connecting our villages to our towns, we'd all feel more confident using it. I get that we're in a cycle of a lack of funding for our public transport. And I think that some of our towns have better public transport than our villages do. So again, a lack of fairness there. I want to see us promoting getting on the public transport. And for me, that comes with a negative of paying properly for the use of your private car, because I don't think that we can continue to behave that way. So I love it that we're promoting active travel, but I think that we have to deter that car ownership or that car parking further. So for me, I'm disappointed that we're not introducing parking charges in other places in the district. I know it's a bitter pill to take for many towns, but I think that's part of the life that we all have to live, is that things cost, but also that we can pay into better public transport. So I guess that's my 2 pennies on that. I look forward to the work we have moving forward I'd like to see us having a bold strategy to really address the fact that 42% of our carbon emissions are from each of us getting in our cars every day to make journeys, and we need to do something about that. Otherwise, we're not protecting the future generations, we're not protecting our children's futures, and we're not doing enough. So that's my feeling on that.
So, Hazel, any other questions?
No, Chairman, I believe that's the end of request to speak.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. So hang
on, Don, we had a couple of questions which I wanted to quickly just pick up. And one was around the college bus scheme. I mean, the college do offer a limited reduction for bus travel, which is supported. However, we won't solve this problem until we give students the same advantage as we give elderly people to use the buses free, and there lieth the problem. We can get all those cars off the road if we treated young people the same as we treated older people, and stop using this silly nonsense is I've already paid, because they're going to pay. And that's about time we got onto that. However, of course, our own funding streams don't allow that. but I'm not sure how we deal with that one. Timelines. I mean, I can't challenge Mike in any way, shape or form. He's completely right. We need to get on with it. The people of Weston have suffered for far too long, and no one's bothered to take this on simply because it's tough. But it will be taken on now, Mike. In the report, it quite clearly says an early focus, and that to me means very soon will be on those areas that have existing charges and those areas that have been affected by the existing charges. So you're quite right, and I think you're quite right to challenge that. And I do feel that we should all be challenging that ongoing, because it has been quite clearly said that those residents in Weston have been adversely affected more so than any other in North Somerset. And the cost, Catherine, in terms of what we're charging, this has been worked out by officers in terms of cost recovery. I'm not sure if we're in a position where we can start subsidising people parking outside their houses and their homes simply because we are concerned that we don't want them to have further charges. I've always said, and as many of you will know, if you can afford to have a car, you can afford to pay to park the car. If you can't afford to park the car, I'm a little concerned how you're maintaining your car. So all of those things sort of come together, and I know that's challenging, but that is a reality. So we can continue to have that debate. That debate will be had under the scheme, and I know SPEDA will be picking up the residence parking zone issue, and I'm under the impression they're probably already talking about it and set up a working group. So hopefully that will be very quickly resolved. So. And so really, in terms of, I would just like to make those proposals again. I don't know whether Nick Brain has picked up the amendment and got the amendment, which I'm happy to take on board, as I think my executive colleagues are all in favour of those that amendment, and therefore there is little point challenging it. We might as well put it on as a number 5. Did you pick up that amendment, Nick?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Cartman was kind enough to send that to both myself and Sue Efford before them.
So with that,
do we want to vote for the amendment of item 5 added to it, or do you want to vote for the amendment and then the revised item? I'll be guided by you, Nick Brain.
So, Chairman, I think Councillor Canniford has accepted the amendment, and therefore it becomes part of the proposal. So it's all
okay.
fine.
So the proposal is now for 5 recommendations. So I'm just going to take on block.
Chairman, before you proceed to the vote, Councillor Solomon has requested to speak.
Okay, Mike Solomon.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be a nuisance when you're just about to vote, but one thing that we completely missed is alternative power for motor cars. I run an electric car. I believe Bridget does as well. A lot of people run electric cars. For the next 5 years, there'll be far more electric cars on the road. So people will still be in a position to park outside their homes, and they won't be emitting horrible diesel fumes. And we need to be aware of that. So there's parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for that, Mike. So we have an amended resolution in front of us, recommendation. Are there any executive members who wish to vote against?
Nothing, Chairman.
Any abstentions?
Oh, I think we had one. I think Councillor Petty voted against.
I think I have to vote against. Sorry, everybody.
Okay, so one against. Any abstentions?
Nothing, Chairman.
On that basis, the rest of the executive are voting in favour of that recommendation. Therefore, it's accepted by a majority vote. So thank you very much, colleagues. Now we move on to item number 12. This is the economic recovery update from Councillor Canniford again.
Thank you, Don. And again, I'd like to thank officers, Jane, Lucy and her team for the amount of work that's gone into this. I mean, this is an update, and it is to endorse the Visitor Economy Action Plan, which sadly and frustratingly, I was disappointed you probably hadn't had the chance to. We hadn't had the chance to vote on this before your radio interview this morning, because this is all part of what we're trying to do in terms of our visitor economy. And I know you were challenged on that, but I thought you handled that really well, so that was fine. This is all, again, taking into the importance that our visitor economy has in the growth or in the wealth of our district. And of course, the visitor economy is worth a huge amount to North Somerset, and Weston-super-Mare in particular, but that obviously resonates outside. I think one of the challenges that were given to us at the beginning of this whole process was we want things done. We just don't want things in strategy or things talked about. And I think this has done that. So down in the report, you'll see the details of what we've been doing and the things that we have put in place to support. So that's really an update to the recovery. And there are some really good things that have happened. So simple things, simple interventions, which we know that many members is like the outdoor public seating. It has been really, really popular. There's no doubt about it. As long as it's not raining, it is always well in use. And that's been fantastic. But the sort of things people continually talk about are the virtual world. How are we going to get our high streets into the virtual world? And we've done that through this report, and it's beginning to work. And I've had an update, and we've on the Made in North Somerset marketplace. I was updated yesterday. We have 33 or 38 businesses now on that. This is growing really well. The virtual high street in Nailsea is really working well. And is growing rapidly, and I believe the Weston-super-Mare one is being launched tomorrow, and we're in discussions with Portishead around, and Clevedon still planning theirs to be launched as well. So these are really good things happening in Western and North Somerset's towns, which have proven it's the sort of things we have all spoke about before getting elected that we want to see happen, and they are now happening. The support to business is huge. There's a huge amount of program now being put in place to support new businesses and those businesses that have found life quite difficult during the pandemic. But that now is well in running, and it's a 3-year program. So they're not just going to be dropped when things are feeling like they're getting a little bit better. And I know that Catherine would be very much interested in the digital inclusion and the fact that we are now helping people. 120 households have been loaned laptops or equipment. They've been enrolled in skills. They are being supported by digital buddies, and that is allowing them to apply for jobs, maybe claim certain benefits, but it's making a difference to people's lives. And I would really like a big thank you to Jane Harrison in particular for the amount of work she's done with our partners and consultees. As you'll see from the list of consultees, it's not just economy groups that have got involved in this. This has been very much across people, across business, across our strategic partners like the airport and like the port up in Portishead. So there are huge groups of people here which have contributed huge amounts. And we've also gone out to our Bangladeshi community, black and minority groups. It's really a piece of work that she has put together, and the meetings that we have had have been incredibly constructive. And I think it allows us to move on, and also allows us to have a group of people now, and it is a considerable size of people in fairness, to allow us to try and look at all sorts of issues around our economy and how we can progress. I don't know whether Lucy wants to come in on anything on that, but just later on there's some things in there for all members of our executive around business adopting principle of reducing plastic, renewing our event strategy, which we have to work on to make sure that we've got those things happening, because they do undoubtedly drive economies. And let's just make sure our accommodation providers up their standards. Let's get to a level that we all want to go to, rather than people just thinking, because the problem we have in North Somerset, and it must be very frustrating for places like Clevedon, Nailsea and Portishead, people assume all the accommodation is a Western standard, and some of the Western standard simply isn't good enough. Some of it is, but some of it isn't, and we need that improved. I don't know if you have to add anything, Lucy.
Thank you, Councillor Canniford. No, I don't have anything to add in particular. I think you've covered the approach that we've taken to all of this work, and the range of sort of short, medium and long-term actions that we are seeking to establish. So clearly we're trying to address some of the very immediate impacts of COVID, but also to take a long-term view around North Somerset's economy and opportunities to grow that, and to respond to the challenges that we have both now and are likely to anticipate in the future. So it's a collection of different approaches, looking at different issues and supported by a range of different measures, but with some very strong endorsement from our business community as part of the process of developing these.
Thank you for that, Lucy.
Thank you. So there are two recommendations on this. I guess Mark Hannaford, you are proposing. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, I am.
We have a seconder. I've got Bridget Petty seconding. Thank you, Bridget. Hazel, does anybody wish to speak to this item?
No request to speak, Chairman.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you for the very comprehensive summary of the report, Mark. And I would say it's an absolutely key item for both Western-super-Mare and North Somerset economy. And I think we do need to adapt to a new norm in terms of there may be many more people who are wishing to holiday in the UK rather than going abroad, which A, keeps the money in our UK economy, and B, reduces air travel. But we need to be ready to provide that.
Yeah, and if I can just add on only quickly on your comments, is that this is an active plan. You know, if councillors feel that the things aren't happening, then we need to be pulling this off the shelf and putting it back in front of our officers, and saying, we're not going in the direction that we all agreed to go in, and we need to. And I think we need to be doing more of that with our plans, simply because there was little point asking officers to put in hundreds of hours of work, and I do thank them for that, if then we shove it on the shelf and don't use it again. So let's make this happen.
Thank you. So there is no comment. So
Chairman, apologies before you go to the vote. Yes, I've just had some late requests from Councillors Petty and Bell.
Mike Bell.
Thanks, Don. I think it is a good report, and it's really pleasing to see the early action that we've taken to support economic recovery, and I think that's really welcome. And the table in the report that outlines some of the immediate support projects is really positive. I suppose my question is really around, and comment is really around our ability to actually deliver upon some of these ambitions, because I think it's strong on objectives and strategies and not so strong on how we will actually deliver some of it. You know, for example, we're trying to deliver a lot of this within the existing funding envelope, and there's no articulation of how we will be able to make the step change either on the wider economic recovery or on the visitor economy that will be required. And I think it's kind of telling that in the report it says under the funding section not applicable, you know, which I think is concerning. I think the other issue is, are we in danger of a bit of strategy-itis? In Appendix 2, where we've got the relationship between the economic plan and other strategic documents, it's reminiscent of the NHS ways of working, with a very significant number of action plans and economic plans and strategies being signposted. And I think, you know, whilst we recognise that it is a complex scenario and there are a number of parallel work streams that are operating together to bring this economic plan to life, I do worry that that's another way in which we can sometimes lose sight of the really critical interventions that we want to take. So I just wonder if Mark or Lucy can say anything about how we translate ambition into reality, given the financial challenges that we face. And I think there's a very real practical demonstration of this from residents and businesses, isn't there? Because what they say to us is, when are you going to open that empty building? When are you going to refurbish that leisure attraction? When are you going to deliver our new when are you going to get new shops open? When are we going to get more jobs in Clevedon? You know, those are the challenges that we get, and I don't know how clearly we're able to articulate the answers.
So, Mike, all I would say is, yes, of course, as you well know, that pressure is paramount. The pressure we keep on organisations, the owners of the Dolphin Square, you and I have been with them trying to apply pressure to get these things open, and that will continue. And I know office are doing the same with Homes England and with strategic partners. But I hate to say it, the priorities lie with us 8. We have to prioritise our spending into things that affect all the residents and all the economies. And if we choose just to spend it in certain parts of our economy, then we can't grumble when other parts of the economy suffer. we need to make sure that we put the funding in some of the things. Some of this has to be really clever stuff. Some of this has to be smaller interventions, but it is down to us to decide where it gets spent. And I will challenge, as I expect my colleagues will in their own responsibilities, of how we do that. And that's what we need to do. So it is down to us to prioritise this, to find the funding for officers. We don't have a magic money tree. Well, apparently Boris does nowadays in 10 Downing Street, but the rest of us don't, and he's not letting us have it. So we do need to find a way of funding some of this stuff, but some of it is essential for, one, the benefit and the well-being of our residents, and the other is essential for the benefit and the well-being of our economy.
Okay, Bridget Petty.
I welcome this report. I think that a lot of the direction of travel is in the right direction. I think that the council did a really good job in reacting fast to bring in outside stakeholders to contribute to this, and in some new voices that haven't been heard from before. And so I felt like this is quite a fresh document, and I still feel that. We've seen it a couple of times come to executive now, but I'm still really supportive of it. I think that where I differ from what Mike is saying is that I think that this actually demonstrates smaller, tangible efforts that are being made. And I actually think those are kind of appropriate for us as a smaller council, but really to be helping some of our small businesses move forward and move up in the right directions. So I don't expect us as a council to be a bells and whistles fixer of all the economic problems of North Somerset. And I appreciate I don't live in Weston, where there are places like the Tropicana or others that sit empty and people ask why that's not being solved. So that's a different context. But I believe that some of the work we're doing here is really positive for the small businesses that are across our area, and that they're of benefit. So that's what I see is as smaller incrementals. And I know that we have a small team that have hit the ground running and done small changes that I think are really responsive to the climate emergency and to the COVID emergency that we're facing. So kind of responsive to the environment we're working in.
Want to say more, Mark?
No, I'm done, and I don't know whether Councillor Charles just wanted to add anything to the tourism, because if he doesn't, I'll put it there quickly for him. Is I know he is really keen to see North Somerset as a tourist location throughout the whole of North Somerset, and sees the benefit of that really sort of coming out of Weston-super-Mare, because North Somerset is undoubtedly a very beautiful place, and we have a lot to offer. And if we can get these things right throughout our whole economy, from north to south, it will have huge benefits to our residents.
It's a beautiful executive to lead it as well.
Chairman, I think Lucy Shamali wished to make a comment.
Okay, Erica, do you want to go first?
No, I'll only be really quick, just to kind of support Mark's points and actually say that we, from this terrible year, actually have a golden opportunity to really sell North Somerset on a wider stage when it comes to our events, our tourism and our leisure provision. We are actually in a unique position as being a location that is part of the trend towards where people want to holiday now. We have rural, we have good transport access, and we have places where people can dip into cities but not necessarily stay in them, which is where the tourism trend is going. So we really have to seize this as an administration. And I think this document actually helps, but also the work ongoing helps as well. And we have a very positive future for North Somerset when it comes to tourism and leisure if we work in this vein.
Thank you. Lucy Shamali.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back on some of the points that Councillor Bell made, because I think, there is a genuine issue around access to funding, but I think what we're seeking to do through all of these plans is to recognise that we as a council are not going to be able to fund everything, and this is very much about us working with our partners. So it's about enabling and convening. So it's about bringing our partners together, using the partnerships that already exist and building on those. And I think the priority actions in the Visitor Economy Action Plan do set that out quite clearly in terms of how we want to work with our destination management organisations, how we want to work in partnership with tourism businesses. And then I think it's also about how we reshape some of our current activities. And Councillor Charles has just referred to our events programme and how we look to design that so that that supports the visitor economy in the most proactive way. So I think this is about doing as much as we can with the limited funding that we do have available to us, and also using these documents, this suite of documents, to put us in a much stronger position to lobby for external funding. And we've already got some successes through the work we've done on our employment and skills strategy, which was adopted by Executive in September, and we now have some funding that's coming from the Department of Work and Pensions to help us to build the work we're doing around our digital strategy with our most disadvantaged communities. So I think this is very much about working with what we have, building on that, building on our partnerships, and exploring bringing extra funding in where we can. Thank you.
And the only thing I would challenge back to, not to Mike actually, to officers generally, is how we work our economic recovery, our visitor economy, all in one bucket, all in one silo. We can't keep working separately. They need to be together. They all one of the same thing, and that's one thing I will challenge officers in. We need to be working much better together in terms of our economic team and our tourist teams. They are one of the same.
So can we go for the vote? Anything else, Hazel?
No, Chairman, I think that's it now.
Yeah, well, we have two recommendations for this item. We've got a proposer and seconder. Are there any votes against? Are there any abstentions?
Nothing in chat, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you. So thank you, colleagues. This has been supported unanimously. So we now go on to item number 14, which I believe Councillor Cartman is going to lead on. Budget monitor.
Yeah, the budget monitor. Thank you, Chair. I'll make a couple of very quick comments, and I'll invite Richard Pensker to kind of further elaborate, if that's all right. So this is good news. We've moved from the end of July to the end of August, and our projected gap for the year has come down by £500,000 to 3.9 million. So that's good. We've also had further funding announced from central government since then. But this is in the context of budget pressures from COVID of 29 million. So we still do face quite a lot of uncertainty within the current year. This report's only for noting and some changes to the capital programme which are contained therein. So I'm happy to move to questions. Perhaps just invite Richard first if he'd like to add anything.
Thank you to Councillor Cartman. Just a couple of points to reinforce really. So it is a positive movement, and that's down to Directorate mitigations across overspends, which are service overspends as well as COVID overspends. So and that's quite normal practice for us this time of year. What isn't normal this time of year is to have a sort of circa £4 million deficit with our budget monitor, which is predominantly driven by COVID financial impacts. What I would say is that's very close to the level of the income loss claim we expect to make out from the MHCLG, and we made our first submission a couple of weeks ago for 1.8 million. We still haven't had confirmation that's been accepted, but there's no reason to think it wouldn't be. The other things I perhaps draw the exec's attention to is 3.5 around the collection fund, which actually isn't, the impacts of which aren't seen in the revenue monitor for this year, but will impact on our financial planning going forward in the MTFP. So clearly, not surprisingly, we've seen collection fund impacts on council tax and business rates, nearer 6 million on council tax in year and 2.35 on business rates. Now we do have some support from government. We have 3 years to deal with that. We can spread that deficit across 3 years. That is a gross impact. When we look at the council specific impacts, it's not as large as that, but it's still significant. And government have made some messaging around helping with some of that in the same way they've helped with income loss, but we expect that to be much less, probably targeted around irrecoverable debt, increasing council tax numbers, that sort of thing. But we will provide further detail of that in our next monitor as we receive it. And probably last point was just around 3.6 is additional funding. We continue to get messages from government around additional funding. Some of it comes through, some of it we are still waiting for clarification from. So since this report, we've received another tranche of infection control money, which is very welcome for residential nursing care and for domiciliary care sector. So that's circa 3 million. And of course, there's been another announcement of a further £1 billion across the country for COVID emergency funds, but we're yet to find out how much we will receive of that. I guess the only thing I would say in the sort of note around further funding is, of course, we are only halfway through the year. We are particularly looking at a trajectory of COVID going away. We watch the rest of the country and lockdowns, and of course, if we have a local lockdown, then of course we'll have some financial pressures to match some of that funding. But happy to take any questions.
Okay. So before we do that, Richard, do we have a proposal? I'm guessing that Councillor Ashley Cartman will propose this item.
Yes, please, Todd, if I could propose that. So the recommendations are to note the projected revenue and capital budgets as detailed in the report, including the likely impacts that COVID-19 emergency response may have on the Council's financial position, and also to approve the amendments to the capital budgets as detailed in the appendix. If I can have a seconder, please.
Councillor Catherine Gibbons, a second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Hazel, do we have anybody wishing to speak?
I've had no request to speak in chat, Chairman.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you Richard, for your exposition, and Ashley Cartman. We'll go straight to the vote then. There are two recommendations. For anybody voting against? Do I have any abstentions?
Nothing noted, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you. So therefore, unanimously approved by the executive. And may I add my thanks to the officers involved in not only within producing this report, but to all our officers. You are very aware of that working not only within the difficult situation they find themselves with the pandemic and business as usual, but in very straitened financial circumstances to add to that as well. So thank you all, both from the executive and members, and I guess the people of North Somerset more generally. So thank you for that. We now move on to the second part of the Ashley Cartman show, I believe, which is item 15.
Yeah, thank you, Don. This is not now looking at the year we're currently in, but it's looking forward in terms of the MTFP, so the medium-term financial plan that we're preparing. So if you go back to February this year when we approved the budget for the current year, at that point we anticipated that for 2021 to 22 we'd have a shortfall of about £9 million on our budget. I don't think I have to say to you that's now forecast to be a lot higher because of the impact of COVID, and we've also got other assets such as Brexit happening as well. And we've also got demand pressures. We heard earlier from Councillor Gibbons about issues in children's services that will undoubtedly need funding. We've got home to school transport issues as well. All of these detailed in the document. And we're also looking at a loss of income next year as well. You know, car parking charges are down as well as other income. And at the moment, we've got no additional funding from central government. So government have been funding the current financial year, but have made no promise about anything in the future. Section 3.3.2 outlines the approach we're taking, which seems kind of a sensible approach and in line with probably prior years. We're going to review what's coming in, challenge our growth assumptions and develop our savings plans. So all very straightforward there. But I think what we're particularly keen to do as an executive this year is to really challenge transformation plans and see if there are things we can do that don't just save money perhaps for the next financial year, but save us money in the long term and help us deliver better value for money for our residents and better services for the same amount of money. And there's 10 different themes you can see that are coming out of transformation workshops that have been organised by officers across the council. So that's very promising. That's as far as we've got at the moment. I think the lists of savings and ideas and assumptions we're currently working through with officers. So thank you for their hard work. And I look forward to updating the executive members at the next executive meeting in terms of where we've got to and what the outlook looks like. So without further ado, I'd like to propose to my colleagues that this report, which is for noting and information, is noted. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Bridget Petty has seconded it. So, Hazel, is there any debate? Does Richard Pence want to make any comments?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any Hazel, any questions in the chat?
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Bridger.
Councillor Bridger, Steve Bridger.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to make a few comments. Thanks, Ash, for that. Obviously, I realise the budget is for the executive to bring forward, and that's right. But with my scrutiny hat on, I think scrutiny does need to take a role in understanding the medium-term challenges and how services actually will need to be transformed next year and obviously beyond. So I'm mindful of that needs to be a proportionate approach. You know, everyone is as busy enough as it is. I don't want to put extra burdens on people, but we are getting to the sort of the business end of the budget setting process now for next year, and I feel there probably does need to be some financial oversight and scrutiny, but crucially I think that needs to be when it's still possible to inform discussion. So the paper talks about the approach, and Ash, Councillor Cartman, you've alluded to that, and I support that. Some quite interesting, some quite exciting things in there about the approach that the leadership team and exec are taking, particularly as Ash, you were saying about to integrate the transformation agenda and innovation themes and things woven into the traditional kind of approach that officers take. I think, I mean, on page 9 of the report under consultation as well, there's reference to the communications and engagement plan. I guess that's something we wanted to do last year, wasn't it? But election purdah kind of scuppered all of that. So again, I welcome that. I just wanted to quote from page 9 though. There's something there that's saying key stakeholders have been identified as residents, service users, town and parish councils, voluntary organisations, community groups, elected members and staff, and targeted messages and activities will be applied to each stakeholder group. And I mean that's right, and I support that. It grated a little bit, and I'm sure this wouldn't have been the intention of the report authors, but I think elected members, in my view anyway, are a little slightly clumsily lumped in with everyone else there. I think we are a bit different. I'm not precious, but this will be another difficult budget, and elected members will need to go out to our residents, or most of us anyway, and defend that budget, explain what we've done and why we've done it or what we haven't done. So I think that in terms of the timetable in the paper, it talks about public consultation and scrutiny in December, presumably after, as you were saying, Ash, I think exec in December is on the 9th. So that doesn't leave an awful lot of time, frankly, before Christmas, whatever kind of Christmas we're going to have. I think, if possible, we need some scrutiny input before it goes to public consultation, because that may or may not inform the actual what goes into the consultation. I think the 9th of December is too late for any meaningful scrutiny engagement. So as a first step, and I think Richard Pinsker knows this is coming, I'd requested an urgent meeting with Richard and with you, Ash, if possible, initially perhaps with scrutiny chairs and vice chairs, so we can input in a timely manner and look at that timetable. I think that's important. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. Can I just come back? So I think you're absolutely right, Steve. So I think, you know, a bit like when earlier in the year we had the budget revisions at the end of July, we kind of met and scrutiny chairs were invited. That's the intention, to do that. Working back the dates, the date for the executive report's the 25th of November. So I'm thinking we've got the 2 weeks before then, our kind of, if you like, our key timeline for engaging at that point. And you're right, at that point, there is ability to influence. After that, it will go out to consultation, and I'm sure Richard's put his hand up and probably add some more detail. But there's going to be a consultation. We're going to invite people from North Somerset Life. There's an article going in, and we're going to use the citizens panel as well. And at the moment, we're kind of toying with the idea about whether we want to do a full member briefing and at what point we do that. But we're open to ideas, really. It's about working the best way to engage with members at the appropriate point where they've got some information to deal with, but not too late where they don't feel they've got an influence. And it's getting that balance about right. I expect Richard wants to come in. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cartman, and apologies, Councillor Bridger, if the report created a sort of a false impression of scrutiny, because what you described in our thinking is exactly what we'd intend to do. And actually, Councillor Cartman is right. It is just a balance about making sure we've got something to present in time to engage with scrutiny, as you say, so you get a genuine opportunity to influence prior to report writing. So let's have that meeting. I think it's a really good idea, and then off the back of that, we can articulate something that works for all of us.
Okay.
Thanks all. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. Hayes, any other questions or comments?
No, Chairman, nothing more.
Yeah, well, the report has been noting, it's been proposed and seconded. Are there any members of the executive against noting this report? Any abstentions?
Nothing in chat, Chairman.
Okay, so we'll pass that unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Now we move on to, I guess, item number 16, which is executive meeting dates, which our Head of Legal and Democratic Services, Nick Brain, is going to lead on.
Hopefully a very quick item we bring to you at this stage, just the forward planning of dates so that members can put them in their diaries. As you'll know from previous years, the executive dates come here, then we'll take a report to council so that you can diarise them all, and then they're formally approved at your annual meeting, which will hopefully take place next May.
Okay. So we're asked to approve these dates. Do I have a proposer? Councillor James Tonkin, a seconder, Councillor Mark Caniford. Yes, thank you very much. Is there any debate?
Councillor Petty is asked to speak, Chairman.
Okay, Bridget.
Just quickly, at the beginning of the year, we proposed that we would try to have these meetings in different locations. I do appreciate that everything has changed, but I do believe that when we return to having meetings, it would be positive to still try to travel to other locations to host them.
Well, I think, Bridget, we're actually having the meetings in different locations at the moment. A very interesting selection. I'm not travelling anywhere, so we've actually achieved beyond what we originally anticipated.
Well, we're doing so well.
Yes.
So I think there was
just to say that at the moment, all you're doing is setting the dates. Obviously, how we conduct them, we can settle at a later time.
Okay, lovely. So, Hayes, any questions or comments in the chat?
No, nothing further, Chairman.
Lovely. We've got a proposal to second for this. Is there anybody against adopting these dates? Any abstentions? Thank you.
Nothing in chat, Chairman.
That's unanimously approved. Thank you, colleagues. Now we move on to, forgive me, I've keep switching between. So item number 17, which is phase 1 of the council's land at Parklands Village contract award for the developer. And this does include an exempt appendix. So if any executive members wish to raise items contained in the exempt appendix, note we will have to go into exempt session. So please be mindful of that. Any comments or questions you may have? Is there anybody that's aware at this moment they wish to comment upon things in the exempt appendix? Okay. So, Ash Cartman, are you going to lead on this one?
Yeah, I am. Thank you, Chair. So this is really good news. So I'm pleased to announce that after a year-long selection process, we've selected Keepmoat Homes for the development of phase 1 of the council's lands at Parkland Villages or Village. So that's really good news. We had a number of very competitive quotes in, but we were satisfied that the bid from Keepmoat was of high quality and value. And was really good and aligned with the values of the council. So that's why they were selected. In summary, the contract will see 425 homes delivered within 5 years with building work to start next September. And it's one of the biggest and most significant developments the council's ever undertaken, I believe. So it's a really good and big project for us to be doing. And it's important not just for current, but also for future residents as an indicator both of this council and its ambition and what we want to do. I think the contract reflects kind of the values of this council in terms of being open, fair and green. I mean, it's fair in terms of there will be 30% affordable housing that's guaranteed compared to a typical rate of 12 to 13% in Western villages. So that's really good. And it's fair in ensuring that at least 20% or about 85 homes will be fully adaptable for those perhaps who are mobility impaired, so they can easily adapt their homes to suit their needs, which is great. The green credentials are really good. Of this, we've got 64 homes that will be carbon neutral, which I think will be the biggest development of carbon neutral homes in North Somerset. Of the remaining homes, all of them will have 75% less carbon than an equivalent home built in 2013. So this is really good. There'll be solar panels and every home will have access to possibly its own or a very nearby electric vehicle charging point. So those of us like Bridget and Mike Solomon can charge their cars when they visit. I think what I would like to say about the openness on this, and when we've awarded this contract, we have sought the views of a number of councillors, but I think it's fair to say that we want to make this better next time. And in discussion with officers, I think that point at which councillors and members who have a legitimate interest in what is actually designed and built in North Somerset, particularly if their ward, want to be able to influence that point is at when we set the criteria for awarding the contract. So I'm going to go away and make sure that in future we get more involvement there, and we also look at the possibility of any involvement going forward through the process if appropriate, but being mindful that we need to stick to the fair award of contracts. So in summary, this is good news for the council, good news for Weston, good news for North Somerset, and I recommend to my executive colleagues that we award this contract for the development of Parklands to Keep Moat Development Limited.
Thank you. So Ash Carlton, I guess you're proposing this. Do I find a seconder? Okay, I've got James Tompkins seconded. Thank you very much, James. Now, I noticed that John Proctor has put his hand up. I understand, John, you did look at this in scrutiny, didn't we? We had some discussions. I don't know if you want to comment first before we put this out more widely.
Yes, certainly not to oppose what Ash has said, but to emphasise the point that in scrutiny we had three of us, Terry Porter, Mike Solomon and myself, looking at this, but it was very, very late in the day, and it was as close to being a fait accompli as you could possibly reach. And there were some issues that, had it come to us sooner, we would have challenged in more detail. We don't disagree with the decision, but we do need to be involved sooner. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
John, I think that point was very widely noted by myself and others involved in the discussion, which led to that scrutiny. I think Ash Cartman intimated in his response that that does need to be much earlier. Thank you for your support. And thank you to both you and Terry and Mike for the work you did at very short notice to scrutinise this piece of work. So thank you. So we've got a proposal and a second. Hazel, is there any demand for questions or queries?
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Porter has indicated a wish to speak, as has Councillor Cato.
So we'll go to Terry Porter first.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I thank, I assume you can hear me okay?
Yeah, perfectly.
Yeah. Can I thank Ash and both John of what they said about there? Yeah, we did have a look at this, and I thank the officers for spending some time with us and going in to this in some detail. This is going to be, a really standout to development here. This is something that we ought to be using as a flagship for North Somerset. As was said, we've actually got 30% affordable housing here, which we ought to push with the developers because we never get that on theirs. And, 6 can have to be used. I didn't know too much about this. I've looked into quite a lot of it when we did this, and it's quite interesting that 74 of these properties will be actually factory built and then assembled on site. Unfortunately, the factories aren't here, but we can't have everything with it. But one of the things we did notice, there were a few imaginative things in some of the designs, and we felt we could have had a little bit more on it. But all of the, both of the top two that were there, we were very pleased with them. But say North Somerset has got a big financial investment into this when you look at it overall, and we really do need to capitalise on this. I think we ought to be using this to twist the arm of developers of what's wanted. The only thing is, it does cost quite a bit more to build these houses. I don't know if I can say how much, because that might have been in your red.
No, don't say that, Terry. No.
No, I'm not mentioning that. But it does cost more, and developers in the future have to start to understand these houses are going to be a real selling point for people. And living them in the future, they're going to be a lot less cost to them with everything. So I think we need to really make the most of this. I'm looking forward to these starting to be built. I think it's only 2021 when the construction starts, and the first houses in 22. So that's not too far away. And I just think we really need, as a council, to make the really big improvement on what, in flying the flag for North Somerset, and twist some of the other developers and what they might do. Thank you.
Absolutely agree with you, Terry, and I would very much welcome the fact we could actually build some of the houses in the factories in a North Somerset location. That would be even better. John Cato.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to say that in the briefing and in what's being said now, we're very laudably going very strongly in terms of the climate emergency and carbon and so forth. Completely behind that. I don't know if it's too late for it to be considered in terms of this project. It may be, it may not, in terms of the aspirations, but listening to Costing the Earth on the 30th of September, there's a programme called The Great Leaky Loo Scandal, which shocked me. And I mention it because it may be possible to consider this within it. It says our demand for water is increasing despite campaigns to reduce it. We know that water is one of the biggest issues we're going to face with the climate emergency. And it said here that billions of litres are being lost from our homes every week, which we could easily fix simply by the choice of system. And so I would love that to be taken on board if it were possible. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you, John. I'm sure we can take that on board. I mean, there's lots of other smaller factors that we've incorporated so far. For example, that there's no gas in this development, for example. And I'd hope
I know, it's brilliant.
I'd hope we could incorporate things like that into the design and have some influence on the development.
So thank you, Ash. May I speak to you afterwards about that as well? Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other questions, comments?
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Solomon as non-executive member and Councillor Crockford-Hawley also has his hands up, and then Councillor Petty as executive member has also asked to speak.
Okay, so we'll go to Councillor Mike Solomon first.
Yeah, as the fellow ward member on this with Terry Porter, and we both looked into this carefully at scrutiny. We're excited by this development, and it needs to be the flagship. It needs to be put out there that we have the capability of building these sort of homes that are good for the community, that are ticking all the right boxes, and that we can't carry on developing sites with the big developers and being dictated to on what we build when we have the possibility to build better homes. And we need to look in the future if we decide we're going to build our own homes, you know, where there is a possibility, so that we don't have to depend on the huge developers and the profits they want to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike Solomon. John Crockford-Hawley.
Thank you, Chairman. There was just one comment that Ash made, and I don't know if it was a throwaway comment, but it just raised a question mark in my mind about gas. It struck me that one of the selling points of this project was that no gas was going to be on site. Now, if that is going to be renegotiated, I'm not sure where that puts us. I feel slightly ill at ease with that now.
I didn't realise it was going to be
No,
John.
there's no renegotiating of that. I was responding to John Cato's point about the use of water and assistance and things. We're not renegotiating the contract, and I should make that clear. I think we need to be careful of that. But just to clarify, no changes to the situation on gas. I think that answers your question.
Okay. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And we have Bridget Petty.
Hi. I've had a briefing on this development, and I'm really, like others have said, really delighted and excited by what this development could become. And I think this is a really positive step. I'm really glad that the role that North Somerset Council has played in really pushing the boundaries and pushing for better for the residents around Weston and the residents who will live there. I'm really delighted that it has a really high number of affordable housing, and it goes above and beyond. But not just that, that there's a high number of social rent in there, because often affordable housing has been negotiated in different ways, but social rent is really important for all of our communities, and that is good there. So I think the bidders have worked really hard to push the boundaries, and Jenny Ford and her team have worked really hard. A procurement process of this scale, having to deal with the OJU process, is no mean feat, and they've done a phenomenal job. And I think that they've taken the values of this administration and embedded that. I think that it does require a lot of professional input of our officers, and I'm really proud of that work that they've done. I'm really delighted that it is a no gas site and that Fabric First is a position that's being used, because I think that will build better homes for future generations. I think that maybe where John Crockford-Hawley may or may not have, well, what I'm noting is there is still reserved matters, and through reserved matters, some comments can be proposed, and it's not significant proposals, but there is room for some comment through the reserved matters process. I look forward to this site being turned around fast. I like the fact that it's got a short timeline, because that starts to address the housing problems that we have and really rejuvenate and provide that quality housing. So I'm delighted to be supporting this today.
Hayes, any other questions or comments?
Nothing further, Chairman.
Thank you. Well, we have in front of us a recommendation to approve the award of contract for development of phase 1 of the development of Parklands Village. It's been proposed and seconded. I was going to go to the vote. Is there anybody against this recommendation? Are there any abstentions?
Nothing that I can see, Chairman.
So thank you, colleagues. I take this as a unanimous approval of this extremely exciting scheme, and I look forward to having very many more. And I would echo the comments of colleagues around the thanks to the officers who've been doing this work. It's been incredibly hard work for them. I've been involved on and off for several months on it, and I think the amount of work they've put in has been remarkable, and I thank them for the work they've done on that, and we look forward to people moving into these homes. So thank you. We now move on to the next item. I appreciate the fact it's now 4:45, and I'm going to recommend we have a 10-minute break, at which stage we'll go on to item 19, which is the urgent business. Okay, so if Mike Riggle wants to stop the recording for 10 minutes, and we will resume at 5 to 5 promptly, please, colleagues. Thank you. Have we got Nick Brain?
Chairman, yes.
Have we got Sue Efford?
Yes, Chairman, I'm here.
Have we got Hazel Clinton?
Yes, Chairman.
And have we got Mike Wiggle?
Mine is with us, and the stream has been resumed, Chairman.
Okay, lovely. Okay, so I was going to suggest we go on to item 19 next. Okay, so we have 2 items of urgent business. Do you wish to talk this through while we are considering these, please, Nick Brain?
So, Chairman, the first one is about the invitation we've received from the Secretary of State for looking at unitary restructure in Somerset, and the deadline he has set for responses means that you need to deal with that today, otherwise you won't be able to respond should you determine that that's what you want to do. The other one is an urgent item on a restructure which has been delayed since the spring, and that needs to be dealt with urgently now, given that the head of pay services is trying to bring forward proposals to make sure that office structures are suitable for coming out of COVID and carrying on with the epidemic, and Ofsted action plans, preparing for Brexit and so on. So both of the items are urgent, Chairman.
And I've accepted those as urgent, so therefore they will be dealt with as the next items of business. Item 19A then is on the potential reorganisation of Somerset. I think colleagues in Somerset are working extremely hard to look at potential unitary solutions and are presenting business cases. There's sort of paper in front of you, executive colleagues, that we say thank you but no thank you, and then we move on, particularly looking at our more northerly direction for the area of expansion, which we need to do, which takes into account our current profiles in terms of health, economic development, infrastructure planning, fire, and the way our residents come out of Weston-super-Mare, Cleveland, Portishead, they can then come out and turn left rather than turn right. So I think with all eyes on the north and to the east. We have a paper in front of us and a recommendation. I'm more than happy to propose the recommendation. Do I find a seconder? Catherine Gibbons. Okay, are we happy to go into any questions? Are there any questions from officers? Nick, do you need to say anything more, first of all?
No, Chairman, I think everything's in the report.
Okay, Hazel, is there any request for comment?
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Hugh James and then Councillor Bell.
Okay, so Hugh James.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving us an opportunity to comment on this, because it's quite outrageous proposals that have just been thrown on North Somerset, proposals that within the House of Commons have been discussed by Somerset MPs like Jacob Rees-Mogg, but no one from North Somerset have been calling for. North Somerset Council are already a unitary council, unlike our neighbours below. We are already very efficient. We are already very low cost that has been raised by Ash. It happens to be that I did one of my linguistics. When I studied linguistics, I studied the effect of local government reform on local identity, and I did some field work here in Portishead. People here in Portishead do not feel like they're part of Somerset. They feel very isolated from that Somerset identity. However, they do feel close with our neighbours across the west of England. So I think the ideas of joining west of England before the period in May is a really good, strong idea that we should be going with. The government proposals for 300,000 and 600,000 size councils do sometimes make sense, but they don't fit with the idea, with the fact that a council is more than just an organisation that does stuff, but it's a group of people that fit together, that work around each other, that we're interlinked villages and towns that work in the community. If we're to accept rule from Taunton or rule from everywhere else, it will really affect our residents here on the ground. And obviously here in Portishead, we already get people thinking that North Somerset and here in Weston is isolated from Portishead. Imagine that if a unitary authority were even more isolated from local identity. So I'm really glad that we're saying no to this local government restructuring, which is on the hoof. It's not been something that has been a collaborative discussion, but something that has been imposed on us very last minute, very little discussion, and I don't think anyone has anything to thank with anything to do with that. But yeah, thank you very much, and I'm really glad that that Joe Walker and Nick Brain put this to us to discuss right now, and I'm really sorry to them that they had a week to do so.
Thank you, Hugh. I think that reflects the comments that have been certainly made to me by residents, and I think there is a certain desire to be led by where the people are, rather than some very historic association. Perhaps we should have gone back to Wessex. We could be busy making sure that cakes don't burn properly, or perhaps we could be looking to the future, which I think is where we are very keen to go. Mike Bell.
There's not much I would add, actually, having listened to Hugh, who's said a lot of it. I mean, I think in the end, local government reorganisation should be a matter for local communities and local authorities themselves, and shouldn't be imposed by government. And in fairness to them, they have dragged North Somerset and Bath and North East Somerset into the wider Somerset reorganisation debate, without, I think, intending to force anything on us. I think we've been dragged into it as a sop to some Conservative MPs who've got hankerings after some sort of historic and traditional Somerset, which in any event is all a little bit rose tinted and misguided anyway, because the Somerset of the past was a very different beast, and brought in all kinds of areas that are now in different local government structures. You know, for me, where does North Somerset sit at the moment? I think we're developing a very clear sense of identity for our district. We've got an ambitious corporate plan that articulates what we want to do together. We naturally look in terms of our employment and our cultural links with the greater Bristol area and the west of England. We've got ambitious emerging proposals for a much bigger network of local authorities across the west. And when we say the west in that context, we're talking about the Western Gateway and opportunities for partnerships with South Wales and with Gloucestershire and Wiltshire, right across the western part of England. So to be sidetracked into some sort of reorganisation of the two-tier structure that exists in the current county of Somerset is a distraction, and frankly a bit insulting to the local authorities in Somerset who have been working hard over a long period of time to come up with proposals for a unitary structure. So it's a distraction. It's nothing to do with us. Thanks, but no thanks.
Thank you, Mike, and I certainly echo the comments I've had back from colleagues in Somerset around very hard work they've been doing to try and get us a different way of working within their own authority, and to some extent, you know, it's a distraction for them from what they're trying to achieve. Hayes, any other questions or comments?
Yes, Councillor Crockford-Hawley has his hand up.
John.
Thank you, Leader. A word in favour of Somerset, but it's purely emotional. We do have a natural affiliation to Somerset, even when it comes to promoting tourism. It is pretty pointless promoting something called North Somerset in terms of tourism, because nobody wants to come to anything that's called North, and we're part of Somerset in terms of tourism, but that's it. We're also very historically linked. I mean, the Statutory Record Office is now operated through the Southwest Heritage Trust at Norton Fitzwarren, and that's the body that looks after all of our statutory records, thankfully. Because if we were to try to arrange something on a Greater Bristol way, like in the old Avon days, it would have been absolutely pointless and hopeless. So we have that link. The Shrievalty, the Lieutenancy, the Diocese, even cricket, it is Somerset orientated, and that is something we maintain and we enjoy being with. But when it comes to the reality of where we look for our economic well-being, we clearly look towards Bristol. And those who want to look towards Taunton, well, sorry, but they need to sell up and move south of the River Axe and go to that area. It makes no sense whatsoever for us to look south. So let's plough on as we're doing and keep our historical links with our friends further south, but no more, no more.
Thank you, John. And just for point of accuracy, can I point out that half of my ward is actually in the Diocese of Bristol?
Point accepted.
Thank you. Okay, so Hayes, any other comments?
No, Chairman, that's it.
So we have a recommendation which has been proposed and seconded. Ask my executive colleagues, are any against the proposal?
Nothing in chat, Chairman.
Are there any abstentions?
Again, nothing in chat, Chairman.
Lovely. So thank you, colleagues. That's unanimously accepted, and we'll ask our colleague Nick Brain to take this forward in terms of getting the response done. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody, for this. Thank you, Joe. So now we move on to 19B, which is a proposal that was sent out this morning. I don't know if Nick Brain wants to lead on this one again.
Chairman, only to cover off, you've already dealt with the reason for urgency. I think it's then a head of paid service statutory report, so I'll leave it for Joe to introduce.
Joe Walker.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update members on a revised organisational structure proposal, including amendments to the senior management structure. I had hoped to bring this forward earlier in the year. However, COVID hit us and I made a decision to delay the review. I'm seeking approval to consult on the proposals and, subject to consideration of those consultation responses, to be able to implement, obviously with or without modifications dependent on the consultation responses. The detail of the proposals are in the exempt paper, and the reason the paper is exempt is due to the sensitive nature of its content. It contains a level of detail which would identify individuals, and therefore I need to have individual conversations with those who are affected and impacted by this review prior to any formal consultation. So please do bear with me. I'm committed, obviously, to sharing more detail over the coming weeks as soon as I can from a HR perspective. In terms of the driving principles, clearly delivering the council corporate plan priorities and responding to the pandemic effectively has required me to consider how we operate as a senior team. And in my statutory role as head of paid services, it's my duty not just to look in the short to medium term, but also to the long-term needs of the organisation to ensure that it continues to transform, works collaboratively both within and outside of the organisation, and responds at pace to the challenges it faces. This review and any other staffing reviews should also contribute to the council's financial pressures. We clearly have to balance, as we've heard earlier, the budget, and there are some serious challenges in terms of the gap for next year. So I would expect that my review would make some savings as a contribution towards that gap. And also the key principles of consolidating and aligning similar functions and disciplines wherever possible would ensure consistency, drive efficiency, and improve service resilience. So as I've said, I think it's really important for me to keep you as updated as I can over the coming weeks, which I'm committed to doing so. But for now, if you could bear with me whilst, as I say, I continue to have some very sensitive conversations with individuals who are impacted. Thank you, Chair.
Just to remind colleagues on the executive that if you do wish to refer to any exempt appendix, we will have to go into exempt session. And bear in mind the chief executive's comments around the sensitivity of the information therein contained. So we have some recommendations. HR would normally form under my remit, so I will propose the recommendations. Do I find a seconder? Councillor Mike Bell is seconding this proposal. So do we have any debate?
Chairman, Councillor Bell has requested to speak.
Okay, Mike Bell.
Certainly not debate, Chairman. I just want to thank Joe for the report and Nick as well, and just to assure colleagues that the exec members and group leaders have been given a sort of background briefing that sits behind this report, and obviously the exempt report that Joe referred to. And I think there's broad consensus that the direction of travel is correct, and so I think it's right now that we give Jo the support to go ahead with the further consultations and dialogue that she needs to progress the proposed changes. So very happy with the situation and recommendation, and hope that colleagues will support it.
Hazel, do we have anybody else wishing to speak?
No, Chairman.
Okay, well, I will now go to the vote. Is there anybody against this proposal?
Nothing in chat, Chairman.
Do we have any abstentions?
Again, nothing, Chairman.
Okay, therefore we unanimously pass this recommendation. So thank you, Joe. Thank you for all colleagues involved in this, and we look forward to getting another report back from you in due course. So thank you very much. Now we move on to the final item, which is item 18, which is the executive members' all reports. I will go round the screen as I have it. I will start off with Councillor James Tonkin. Do you have anything to tell us, James?
No, Chairman, nothing else to add. Thank you.
Okay. Anything on the 2nd of November? Anything happening on the 2nd of November?
Yeah, 2nd of November being the start date for the local plan choices consultation, and also for our new active travel plan consultation. So there's a red letter day to be had there. Thank you, Chairman.
Ash Cartman?
No, nothing further to update. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mike Bell?
Thanks, Don. Just a couple of things I wanted to mention. One was just to say that obviously with the increasing number of COVID cases that are being reported around the country, I just want to put on record again our continued thanks to our social care colleagues for all the work they're doing in care homes, in domiciliary care, and directly through our own services and support. We're going to go through a difficult winter period where, again, it's going to be challenging for a lot of our health and care staff. And we are all still very mindful, just as we were back in the spring, how hard they are working and under such difficult circumstances. And just to say as well on the COVID-19 position, over the last 7 days, we've had 127 people tested positive for COVID-19 in North Somerset. But our case rate per 100,000 still remains well below the South West and England averages. And we're obviously at the lowest level of government alert, which is tier 1 medium. But I think it's important that we note that case numbers are still growing and therefore we cannot be complacent. So we do need to encourage our residents to stick to the guidelines around washing hands, keeping 2 meters away from people outside your household and bubble, and wearing a mask in indoor public spaces. And I think it is really important when we look at what's happening in other parts of the country where case numbers have risen more seriously. We've seen higher restrictions imposed, which will impact on the ability of us all to see our nearest and dearest and mix with our friends, but critically will have damaging effects on the local economy. So we really must take our responsibilities seriously, do our bit, and keep our case numbers low. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, and I think we reiterate that fact, and we do have 2 very challenging periods coming up, which is both Halloween and bonfire night. Mike, I don't know if you want to think more from your own point of view, any advice from within your own public health.
So we'll be issuing some further guidance around Halloween and bonfire night in due course. But I think the most important message really is don't think that it's business as usual and that everything can go on the way it always used to. A lot of the bonfire nights and firework displays I know have been cancelled in terms of the organised events. Certainly my own children won't be participating in trick-or-treating in the way that they would have done in previous years. And we will issue some more detailed information and some suggestions about other ways that people can celebrate those events without risking spread of the virus. But I think the key thing is, again, just think about what you're doing, think about the impact on yourself and others, and make good decisions.
Thank you. And I would be remiss in my role as chair of the Fire Authority to issue reminders around handling fireworks with extreme care. More people are going to be having displays at home. Not only has it got a coronavirus issue, it's a safety issue with dealing with fireworks. So please, please, please be careful on all fronts. Catherine Gibbons.
I have nothing specific to add, but I just echo what Mike was saying about thanking our staff, particularly our social work teams and all those people who work with our vulnerable children throughout this period where the additional COVID pressures are huge. And just to note that, yeah, we have got cases in North Somerset. Nationally, we have a picture where a growing percentage of children are not in school because of COVID cases. So it's doubly important for the well-being of our young people and for North Somerset in general that we keep up with the hygiene measures and make sure that our children are able to keep going to school. So yeah, we'll all be hammering home those messages through whatever media we have available to make sure that families and young people are fully aware of what they need to do to keep safe and keep in education.
Thank you. Bridget Petty?
I'd like to thank everybody who made it to the end of the meeting and have stayed tuned into a bit of a long agenda, but I think there's a lot of good things that we've covered today. I just wanted to highlight that last week we did some really good training for many of us on carbon literacy, and we were sent off with a little bit of homework to do our carbon footprint. And there's two different ways that I can recommend. There's others you can find online, but Geeky Zero and pawprint.eco. Perhaps, you know, this is the time to, if we're sitting at home, we haven't got as many places to go, work out your own personal carbon footprint, work out if you can reduce it. And that's what we'll be doing as elected members as well and as officers. So thanks everybody for your time.
Sorry for you, Bridget. I've got to cook the tea next.
So have I.
Mark Canniford. He gone?
He's left
Chairman,
the meeting, yes.
I think Mark had to leave.
He hasn't stomped out. That was deliberate leaving. Okay, so Mark, thank you for your contribution. And the next two is going to be myself at the double act. I received some news last week, which was, for me, both good and bad, and that Caritas has decided that he is going to resign from the executive for personal reasons. So I'd like to record not only my own personal thanks, but those of my executive colleagues for everything he's done within our new administration in a very, very new world. I cannot give you that big box of chocolates in the remote way of working, or the bunch of flowers. So you have to imagine that. Caritas, would you like to say a few words?
I would, and I'll try and keep them as brief as possible because I know people want to go. I won't. It's the nearest I'll come to the Oscars. Here we go. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. I've really enjoyed the time, and I'm going to be taking a engagement role in Bristol that is really, really good, and I'm looking forward to. I just want to thank a few people I've worked with. I want to thank the library service. I've been immensely proud to work with the library service and Emma and her team, and the work that they've done in keeping community cohesion during the pandemic, and it's just been amazing. I want to thank the Seafront team, especially Russ Curry, who's retired now, but when I first started gave me a rather candid view of the world of North Somerset politics, which was really quite interesting. I want to thank Louise and the Equalities team and the work that they're doing on the new Equalities commitment. Watch out for that. It's going to be really exciting. I'd like to thank Rhiannon and Emma, who have been doing work on the new citizens panels, and that's been really, really great as well. And Vanessa and the comms team for not shouting at me when I've suggested wacky ideas. Joe Walker, Lucy Shamali, Gemma Dando for their understanding and open-mindedness to my unorthodox political suggestions. Richard Blows for sitting in a meeting with me and saying, I've got an art strategy, would you like it? And actually working on that and having it within the first 6 months of this administration. Our Green Spaces team for the work that they've been doing, making sure that we've had secure open spaces during this time of pandemic and beyond. It's been an honour to work with you. Thank you all. I'd like to thank my independent group colleagues. First, Don and James, you are stars, sir, both of you, and thank you for your kindness and compassion working with me. And to my party political colleagues, I'd first like to praise you by criticising the organisations you're members of. I think party politics is broken. I think party politics encourages us to look at our worst natures and define ourselves by what we hate, be it rich or poor, left or right, remain or leave. I think it appeals to our baser instincts, and it needs to change. I think governance is broken. When I came in as a new councillor, I sat there horrified by the ritual, pomposity and jargon that only acts as a barrier to people's wider engagement. We recently, as a council, passed a climate emergency. I think as a council and as a country, we need to pass a democratic emergency. It is equally dangerous and equally valid. With the rise of populist and nationalist politics, we are in a dangerous time as a country and a world. I said that party politics is broken, but I still have respect for those who work within it. When we started as an executive, we were told we were naive. We were told there were too many voices, too many opinions. The respect and generosity given for different views and different opinions within the executive has been a light that shines in the darkness, and I thank you all for your support to me and your support to each other during this time. The executive have worked in a time that we didn't ask for and we didn't expect. And to be quite frank to people listening into this, they are not paid enough. I am going on to a role with far less responsibility where I will be paid significantly more than they are to do a job. And that is disgraceful. But I can say that because I'm not going to be there. I would like to say as well that I hope and pray, even though I have reservations about how things are going forward, that engagement is first and foremost at the beating heart of North Somerset Council, because how we work as a council and how we bring the public with us is vital. Politics is too precious to be left to just politicians. So if you're watching this and you're an armchair moaner, an internet warrior, I say to you, you have no right to complain unless you are part of the solution. If you are not, then you are part of the problem. And I say to you, be the change that you want to be. I'm going to disappear into obscurity now, but I will remain a proud councillor for the best ward in North Somerset, Portishead East. And I thank you for your time, and I will remain a critical friend to the executive from the back benches. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caritas, and good luck with your
thank you
with your continuing of one career and your embarking on another. Thank you. So from one piece of work to another, then that then means that we need to make some changes within the executive, and I think that today's meeting for me has demonstrated the level of the challenge that we have as an executive. You know, that we have business as usual to deliver, as we've discussed today. We also have some very, very big projects, the likes of the local plan, Bristol Airport, to name but two, and to try and take forward that different agenda as much as Caritas has described, and also try to work in terms of the impact of the pandemic upon us. And I'm also very conscious of the health of my colleagues. We're all having been asked to make quite complicated decisions on a very, very regular basis, both singly and jointly. So I also have to be very mindful of the resilience of us as human beings as well. So I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to ask Mike Solomon to take over the executive role vacated by Caritas. But I'm also going to add to our resilience by appointing two assistant executive members, and in two very key areas of pressure, which I think we have. And the first, I would like to welcome on board Nicola Holland, who will take over a role of community engagement, both engagement and consultation, and with our town and parish councils. And I welcome Nicola onto our executive. I'm really delighted. She has an extremely busy life already, and the fact when I spoke to her, I was just delighted she could work with us. And I'm also inviting Jeff Richardson to take over as an assistant executive member for highways and transport. And I appreciate we've got some pretty strategic work here around highways, our strategic and active travel, and our parking strategy, which are just two items on our agenda today, which are extremely large, and with the pressures on in terms of local plan and airport and everything else we're doing in that place agenda. I think it's really important that we add to our resilience. So welcome, colleagues. I'm really delighted that you've accepted the offers to come on board. If you wish to say anything, please do so. I appreciate we have been on now for 3 hours, so you may want to just say hello and then we'll close the meeting, but it's entirely up to you three. I should go to Nicola first in where we are on the screen rather than anything else.
I'd just like to say thank you for having the faith in me, that I will share the faith in you to work together as a team. I'm really looking forward to this, and yes, thank you very much, Don, and thank you, Caritas. You've got some big shoes to fill.
He's got a very nice set of filing boxes in that room as well, which you've got to match. Jeff.
Thanks, Don, and I can only reflect what Nicola's just said. I'm really looking forward to try and help in any way I can. And really, after Caritas, we can't really make any kind of speech, can we? So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
And Mike, last but not least, looking very resplendent in shirt and tie.
Well, I thought I'd put a tie on today.
Yeah, I know. I noticed.
First of all, Caritas, that was a very inspiring speech. I was ready to go out on the streets with my flag. It was a very inspiring speech, and you hit home on a lot of your comments. So yeah, well done. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited going forward, and I only hope that I can do everybody proud, my constituents, my fellow members, the officers. So thank you very much, and look forward to working with you all.
Thank you. And just for a transparency viewpoint, I will ask via Sue Efford that the change in the roles are put on the website. They have been supplied to the Legal and Democratic Services team. I'm not going to read them all out now. We have been here for 3 hours, and I'm sure you don't want an extra quarter of an hour me reading out a list of roles. I think it would be taking your patience to extreme. So thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you very much, officers, and thank you very much those of residents of North Somerset that are still with us after 3 and a bit hours. So thank you very much all, and I look forward to working with you all in the very near future. Have a very good evening.